to share their experiences with you, to share some opportunities with you. So we hope you brought lots of pens and paper. We think there'll be some great conversations and great ideas bubbling up from today. But to get things started and to welcome you to the wonderful town of Seneca Falls, I'm pleased to welcome the Supervisor, Mike Ferraro.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. And on behalf of the people of Seneca County, the County Board of Supervisors, County Manager Mitch Rowe, the people of Seneca Falls, the Town Board of Seneca Falls, we welcome you to the Historic Rules Hotel in historic Seneca Falls. And welcome to Women's History Month. You're about 20, 30 feet away from ground zero. So welcome. Everyone in Seneca County is very excited about the many things happening through our county. We continue to grow our world famous wine industry. Our agricultural growth potential increases every year. The municipalities of our county work closely together to enhance economic development throughout our county. We work very closely to bring infrastructure, water and sewer to the 318-414 corridor. And we're very proud that it was a home of the Del Lago Casino and recently soon to open Love's Travel Plaza on the corner of 318 and 414. That corridor has never been more developed than it is today in 2022. So we're very excited about the potential and the continued growth of that area. Seneca Falls is getting very close to executing the DRI grant, Downtown Revitalization Initiative, that we received from the state government in 2019. As I speak today, I'm signing contracts and planning has begun for major projects. The Blue Hotel was a recipient award-winning pleasure grant, and they are in the process of signing contracts for close to $1 million of renovations. The town itself, we have 3 municipal projects, some improvements to our community center, adding a enhanced skate park and ice skating rink. Our visitor center is going to get some enhancements, and behind on the south side of Fall Street, behind our stores, we are $3.4 million enhancement there to bury utility lines and enhance odor and amenities and all the natures of things, and develop a people's park that we have already, but we'll again enhance that. So we're very excited to get a shovel in the ground here, hopefully, before I come out of office, but hopefully it'll happen. Our industrial park down the road is getting close to full occupancy, and we welcome a new company. We'll be probably the last company that's going to fit there, Best Made Products, who will be opening very soon, and they are a manufacturer of docks, aluminum docks. So things are looking very bright for us, and we hopefully working on an expansion of an existing company called Seneca Energy, which will convert methane gas that is produced at the landfill. It's a very toxic gas. They convert methane gas to renewable energy and make it a clean gas. And then there's a pipeline that it goes into, and it's sold throughout the country as clean energy. So we're excited about that expansion too. Again, I welcome you, and we're looking forward to working collaboratively with the Genesee Finger Lakes Region Council. I'm very proud to say that the MRB group is a partner of the town of Seneca Falls. They helped me personally and the town. So anything they have to say, listen carefully. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Supervisor. So for those who don't know me, my name is Matt Horn. I'm the Director of Local Government Services for MRB Group. And to borrow from the acclaimed songwriter, John Cougar Mellencamp, I was born in a small town and raised in a small town. And a small town is where I want to be. The work that we do as part of our local government team is almost wholly done at the local government level and at the rural level. And we work in rural communities for a couple of different reasons. One, because they are what we call actionable scale. So I've spent about 20 years in local government supporting communities about the size of Seneca Falls. And what I love about working in those communities is when we make a decision, when we execute a program, when we take a measure to resolve an issue, we can see the effects of our work almost immediately. We're the closest to our constituents, which on some days we don't count as a tremendous benefit, but I promise you that they do. They count it as a tremendous benefit to be able to pick up the phone and to speak with someone who can get something done. And these days, for sure, that means something. We do a little program that we call the Municipal Boot Camp, and I open each of those sessions by saying a word of gratitude to folks like yourselves. People who, in some cases, volunteer. I see we've got some planning and zoning board members here today. People who have chosen to run for elected office, which is virtually volunteer-based. Those aren't significant paychecks at the town and village level. People who do it because they love it, and who do it because they want to see real change in their communities. That's why we do it. That's what we believe in, and that's why we're here today. We're here today also because of a group called the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. And there's a couple of those staff people out there today, including Executive Director Richard Sutherland, who has been instrumental in helping us pull this program together for you today. And as I mentioned when we opened, we're supported today by multiple state agencies and by experts, practitioners in the field of community development. And so I am going to pledge to say a lot less than I already have for the rest of the day, and to leave it to those experts and to those practitioners. And so first up today, we have someone who I am so happy to call a really good friend and a mentor of mine in community development. So you all have your agenda, and you can certainly read about her accolades and her professional accomplishments. But to me, Nicole Manapol is a true believer. She's someone who does this work because she knows what it means to the communities involved. We were just speaking in the hallway about her current role and what she sees as taking these federal and state resources that even the folks who work in those agencies in the room today know how quickly those can get logjammed and how difficult it can be to get those very necessary funds out the door. And Nicole was speaking passionately at the front door today about her concern that those dollars might not get out the door in time to make a real impact. And that's what she sees her role as. She is here today to talk to you about a program called Letchworth Gateway Villages. And I'll speak in a moment on that, but she represents an organization called RCAP here today, and I'll read something from RCAP's website that I think is so apropos to the conversations we're about to have here. It says, what rural means to people is as diverse, textured, and complex as the communities themselves. In some cases, rural is a way of being that resonates beyond regions and geographic boundaries. And if I didn't know that Nicole has only worked at RCAP for a short period of time, I would have thought maybe she wrote that because I know she believes it. And so I'm excited to have her here today to talk about regional collaboration and what you can get done at the local government level with the right partners. So please, everyone, welcome Nicole Manapol.
I wish I could have one of those every day.
Just give me a call. I'm making your alarm wake up.
So here, hopefully I don't spill anything, any wires in the process. Just making sure that
Point at this. Point at that.
oh, there. Okay. Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining today. I am blessed today with actually two portions of my life. As Matt was saying, I recently took on a new job at RCAP. So I have one of my colleagues here, Scott Muller from RCAP Solutions, which is one of our regional partners. RCAP works through a network of national partners. We work at every single state, territory, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, tribal areas. And I'm also joined here with my colleagues who I'll be talking about Letchworth Gateway Villages. So I've got Carl Schoenthal in the back from Wheatland, Kevin Marks, and our new program manager, Emily Ashworth. And hopefully I will save some time to allow some of my colleagues to talk to some of this stuff. So it's great to be here. It's great to be in person finally with everyone and in Seneca Falls. So, you know, to mark the month of March, which is celebrating Women's History Month and International Women's Day next week. So thank you, Supervisor Ferraro, for hosting us today. And it's really an honor to be here to kick off what I hope is going to be the first of many rural development summits for our region. And I thank the Genesee Finger Lakes Planning Council for your leadership in convening this really important event, and also for MRB Group for your assistance in facilitating this dialogue. As you know, Matt was saying, the first thing I came in the door talking about was you know, I think this historic investment that we have in this real moment that, you know, we're being asked to meet. And I think over the last week, you know, working at RCAP, this week is our National Advocacy Week. So we bring in all of our, you know, rural partners from all over the country to have sessions with Congress to talk about what's happening. And you know, I've been heartened by those conversations. You know, the other day I met with the Undersecretary of the USDA, Xochitl Torres-Small, who, you know, is asking us, you know, how do we get this money into some of these hardest to reach communities? Because we all just lived through 2 years and are still living through the pandemic, where we all experienced, saw with our own eyes, the inequities that are currently in place, and particularly for rural communities. And so, you know, people don't want to just do business as usual, and they want to make sure that we're getting, you know, the money into the right places, into the communities. And, you know, the only way we're going to be able to do that is through partnerships. And so today I'm going to be talking to you about kind of 2 things. Obviously the work that, you know, Matt talked about. I've, you know, you can read my bio in there. Prior to, you know, coming back in 2017 to the area, I worked internationally. And so doing this work over the last 5 years, this has been in my hometown where I was born, with many of the people who were my mentors over the years. So as Matt was saying, you know, we live and we breathe this. And so the model that I'll be sharing with you is a really interesting municipal collaboration. And again, as we start thinking about the kinds of relationships we need to build, the kind of trust we need to reestablish, I think what this group of kind of pioneering mayors, town supervisors, community leaders did over the last 5 years provides a really compelling model for replication. And the other kind of lens I'm looking at through here is, you know, obviously the work that I'm doing now with RCAP, and, you know, kind of our model of community and economic development, which is, you know, more holistic. It's recognizing that wealth building is not just about money. It's about a lot of other things. It's about, you know, the intellectual capital, the social capital, political capital, your natural resources, your, you know, a lot of our tribal communities and the culture that we have around here. Those are all assets. And as we look at moving forward and talking about real transformational change, I think we need to start talking about what those new models of economic development might look like. You know, I think my learning curve coming back to the States and working here is, you know, this kind of sense that, you know, we've got to attract something from outside. A big company that's going to save the day, or, you know, we focus on kind of extractive industries. I've worked for many years in the Middle East, in Latin America, in the outback of Australia, where, you know, oil is king, natural gas is king. And so watching, you know, how some of those extractive approaches to economic development led to a lot of the issues, you know, population loss, loss of ownership, and, you know, lowering incomes, all of those types of things. And so I'll be sharing with you, you know, kind of the way that we look at economic development as, you know, working with all these different kinds of forms of wealth and supporting communities in that way. So, you know, just, you have my bio in there. You can kind of see a little bit about where I was and, you know, how I got here. But, you know, again, going back to this issue of trust and relationship building. And in fact, I was just sitting with my colleague over there from RCAP Solutions talking about, you know, what makes this work possible in a lot of these communities, and it is really that trust. So prior to coming back, my job was working in post-conflict. So as you can imagine, there was not a lot of trust in a lot of the communities that I worked in. And so again, I can't really emphasize this point that, you know, working on building those relationships, coordinating that communication, is going to be really key to, you know, this next phase of you know, our development. There we go. All right. So briefly before I kind of get into Letchworth Gateway Villages and, you know, our model, we talk about doing economic development differently. And so as I was talking about, some of these traditional approaches to economic development can be somewhat extractive. And so as I'm talking today, you know, I'm really going to be kind of rounding to this idea of multiple forms of capital and the different ways that, you know, we can look at, you know, our assets as ways to create new types of market opportunities. And this is essentially what the WealthWorks model focuses on. And I can read it from that direction. So focuses on building lasting wealth for regions, acknowledging that wealth means much more than money. Building lasting wealth means growing multiple capitals, a strong sense of community, good infrastructure, a well-trained workforce, unspoiled natural beauty, and inclusive and open government. So Letchworth Gateway Villages was established in 2017 between the villages of Perry Mount Morris and Geneseo. And it was initially put together because of this sense that, you know, with Letchworth State Park, that I don't know, most of you are probably familiar with, attracts nearly 1 million people a year. It was growing in popularity, and, you know, they kind of felt they were in between these two kind of tourism regions. So you had, you know, the Finger Lakes that was booming to the east, the Niagara frontier to the west, and they felt like they were in this kind of no man's land. So, you know, getting together, that was really some of the impetus of why they got together to, you know, look at ways that they could leverage that increased visitation to Letchworth State Park to grow their economies, to grow, you know, their downtown districts. And so essentially they work together to foster new economic opportunities through the preservation and promotion of our region's unique natural, cultural, and heritage assets. And so when I got here, really there were 3 questions that, you know, or problems essentially that I was being asked to solve was A, how can our communities more effectively tap the Letchworth State Park market? What are the economic opportunities related to tourism in Letchworth Gateway's communities? And then what can LGV help catalyze in a 3-year period that's going to help advance that economic potential for the region? And so over the years, we've grown. So, you know, from starting with, you know, just 3 communities centered around Letchworth State Park, we, through multiple different grants and opportunities, were able to expand that to 5 regions that make up the Genesee Valley. And so today we're working with about 10 communities across 4 counties in this region. And so why focus on outdoor recreation? So for us, one of the first things that I did in terms of trying to answer this question about, what were some of the economic opportunities related to outdoor recreation. So we did a visitor survey and did some market research. And of course, we all know that attractive places and quality of life are one of the big deciding factors in terms for employers these days. That's come very clear during the pandemic, where we're seeing lots of people moving back to the area, buying homes, being able to work remotely. And so these were all the kinds of things that were happening when I came on board. The fact that we had digital technologies that were allowing people to work and live where they wanted to. The culture wasn't quite here back then, but certainly the pandemic has accelerated that understanding. But like I said, Letchworth was already attracting nearly 1 million people to the region. When we were doing our research in 2017 and taking in spending data from tourists, we found that it generated 51 million in local and non-local visitor spending, which in turn supported an estimated 591 jobs in the local area and 20 million in labor income. And so when you look at that against our other industries in Wyoming and Livingston County, that would have made Letchworth State Park the 3rd largest employer in the region. And then just in the US and around the world, and of course, the work that I've been doing overseas, ecotourism, sustainable tourism had been a really important economic driver. And so, when I was given this task to look at this, I immediately saw, the opportunity to think about sustainable tourism as, the kind of approach that we might use in this context. And so the outdoor recreation industry as well was booming. And so this is data from prior to the pandemic through the outdoor industry, outdoor recreation industry. And it's an advocacy group that, looks at the outdoor recreation sector and, found that, this is one of the largest areas of consumer spending. So $887 billion, the only sectors that consumers are spending more in is healthcare. Right now, this outpaces the entertainment industry, it outpaces, gas, oil, all of those, and is, a huge contributor to the economy, so much so that, again, in 2017, the Bureau of Economic Analysis began measuring outdoor recreation as part of GDP. Right now, again, this is pre-pandemic, because the pandemic has really messed up a lot of our stats these days about what to expect, but represents 2.2% of GDP. And in New York State, we already rank 4th out of the 50 states for consumer spending and outdoor recreation. We're already at the top here. And so, again, all of these things to say that this presented a really compelling opportunity for our communities to think about in terms of, where we were going to go next. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is one of the best infographics I've found recently. This comes from the State Outdoor Business Alliance Network. And again, kind of going back to that framing that we talked about in the beginning about those 8 capitals, you can really see here kind of the multiplier effect that outdoor recreation can have. You have your, focus on natural assets, but for us, this really became an opportunity for, kind of reimagining and reframing our rural economy through our region's unique natural, cultural, and heritage assets, things that we already had in abundance. And it also, helped us think about, you can kind of see the different pieces here of entrepreneurship and the small businesses that are supported by people coming to your area for outdoor recreation or tourism. And, realize that with our ag industry, for example, that it also helps, address a number of our regional challenges, including evolving the dairy industry. So a lot of my friends that I grew up with had dairy farms, and, things weren't good when I arrived. Farmers were getting, suicide prevention letters along with their milk checks. And, you know, knowing the struggle of many of the farmers in our region, you know, I know they're always thinking about what are the different ways that we can diversify and leverage these assets that we have over the years for new entrepreneurial opportunities. And outdoor recreation has proven to be one of the key drivers for that. It also, you know, I think challenges municipalities to answer the hard questions of who we are and who do we want to be now and in the future. It encourages municipalities, residents, and the business community to look at the historic villages, our lifestyle, our homegrown entrepreneurs, our protected environments as key assets critical to economic sustainability. And most importantly, it promotes collaboration. You know, none of these natural assets, the park doesn't know the difference between Wyoming and Livingston County. The river doesn't know the difference between Allegheny and Monroe County. It's, you know, the thing that binds us together. And so it provided a really good way to kind of connect all of these dots for us as, you know, as an initiative. So I'm going to kind of talk about our evolution in, you know, 3 kind of stages. So we talk about, you know, kind of the catalyst. You know, this initiative didn't begin or end with Letchworth Gateway Villages. It was really kind of coming in and pulling all of the pieces together, setting the table, and now it's evolving to, you know, kind of its next phase. And so, you know, we talk about the catalyst of, you know, preservation. Initially, this is kind of what brought people together, creative placemaking. And so that's been a key component of how we started defining our identity, again, as the Genesee Valley. And, you know, kind of leveraging Letchworth Gateway Villages for that. And then now economic development, the Trail Town initiative that we've been launching over the last 2 years. And that is really having a lot of momentum and success in kind of pulling these things together. So the catalyst, downtown revitalization. LGV was definitely a natural outgrowth of over 10 years of downtown revitalization in Perry, Mount Morris, and Geneseo. And it really was about, you know, kind of the collective efforts of community organizations like the Food Street Association. Just going to show you some pictures here of our downtown. This is Mount Morris in Livingston County. This is Perry, the brewery, in Wyoming County. And, you know, people like Rick Hauser, who's the mayor of Perry, also an architect, the Main Street Association, Louise Wadsworth, the Livingston County Downtown Partnership Coordinator, who had all worked together, excuse me, to transform the built environments in their area. And, you know, this really served as the catalyst that got people thinking about, okay, well what's next for our communities? At the same time, Letchworth State Park, you know, voted the #1 state park. You have this increased, you know, visitation, 34%. You have lines coming out of the park, and that really got these 3 communities to think, okay, what can we do to ride this wave, to set ourselves up and position ourselves for this opportunity? Alongside of this, you have things like the Genesee Valley Greenway and groups of people who had literally since the early 90s been working to reestablish the Greenway as this, you know, eco corridor, multi-use trail. And so you had, you know, a number of efforts. These are just some of the kind of historical images of the canal, which it was previously. And a railway line where people, you know, used to come into Letchworth on the train and picnic. And here's their timeline, which again, you know, this group was also kind of leveraging this historical asset and redefining it for a future use. And they worked with multiple partners as well, who were the Genesee River Wilds, the DEC, New York State Parks. And so, you know, the reason I talk about all of this, because this really kind of lays the stage for, you know, when we got together in 2018, and part of the work that I was asked to do was, you know, this kind of creative placemaking process. And so we brought all of these people together, for the first time in a long time, and started talking about what makes our place special. And as we started talking about it, we realized that, Letchworth State Park is important, but really who we are as an area is the Genesee Valley. And I love this quote from Deborah Fallows. I don't know if you're familiar with our town's 100-mile journey into the heart of America. Definitely recommend reading it. But, she writes, the first thing that towns need to sit down and do when they're serious about trying to make improvements is figure out who they are. And that's certainly what happened with us. And so we all converged. We, began to realize that our story was bigger than just Letchworth State Park. And, so we really worked to revive this regional identity, the Genesee Valley. Right here, this was actually a pamphlet that was found in the walls of the brewery, the Silver Lake Brewing Project in Perry, when they were doing construction. And this used to be the Perry Herald. And it was Guy Comfort, who was the editor, who used to have this, this, I guess, destination marketing organization that talked about, the Genesee country, and they talk about all of these areas along Route 20 and 5. And so again, by going back and kind of reconnecting with our past, this really brought us together and helped us develop, our future. And so part of what we do is, what we call mapping our story of place. We work with National Geographic to develop a digital platform where we're iteratively creating our identity. So as people crowdsource and talk about what is special about our area, it goes up on our website, and the map starts building out, and people can start seeing this kind of story of place in real time. And you can see it's www.exploregeneseevalley.com if you're interested. But again, it's powered by local voices. It was also a strategy to help build our digital capacity and visibility, which is something that we struggled with and continue to struggle with, but is definitely getting better. And again, it was a way to kind of strengthen our destination ecosystem. So how do we start bringing visibility to all of these different trail routes, all of these different outdoor recreation assets? So this has been kind of, the backbone of our collaboration. So creating new economic opportunity. In 2019, the same network of people that, have collaborated on getting this website up and telling the story and developing this brand. We received funding from, this is actually how I got connected with RCAP for the first time, from the USDA's Rural Economic Innovation Initiative. And we became one of the recipients. We had 2 years of planning assistance. And during this process, we really started looking at, this is kind of our opportunity map. Responding to some of these things that we started learning. We've got 70,000 acres, 200 miles of trails and public lands. We're leaders in agriculture. We've already got nearly 1 million people coming to Letchworth. How do we start pulling all of this together? And it was through this planning process that the group's energy really focused on the Trail Town model. And I don't know how many folks here are familiar with that, but essentially it came from the Main Street model for development. But it pairs that whole concept of downtown revitalization with leveraging your outdoor and natural assets. And so, the model that we were looking at was the Great Allegheny Passage. In their most recent study that was released in December 2021, they found that in 2019, the Trail Town, the work that they did collectively along the 150-mile trail generated $121 million in economic impact just in 2019 alone. Over the 10 years that they were really piloting this and kind of looking at the impacts and learning from it, they had an overall economic impact of $50 million a year. They had 65 new businesses and 270 jobs in their first 10 years, a 10-fold increase in visitation, including overnight stays, which generate 6 times more revenue than day trips. And other documented impacts included increased property values, improved infrastructure in rural areas, and shifting mindsets. So the increased visitation and economic activity produced by trail users ultimately helped build the social cohesion and pride of place among local residents, and in turn motivated them to start protecting and sustain their assets surrounding nature. So go through this very quickly, but these are the 10 towns that we're now working with, from Southern Monroe and Wheatland all the way down to Cuba and Allegheny County. And I'll share this image. This is my colleague Carl's favorite slide that we like when we go on our roadshow together. This is the long-term vision. We'd love to, and I'll let Carl speak to this in just a second, but this is what we've been calling the Grand Tour. And as the Empire State Trail, the Erie Canalway Corridor got finished, we've now got, we're essentially kind of the last frontier in New York State for trail development. And we're seeing more investment from the state and from private philanthropy to finish the Greenway. At the same time, we're looking at a route that would come down from Buffalo into the southern tier. And so at some point, we might actually be able to cycle this whole region with that if this momentum keeps up. So essentially, this was our story. Our impact really was about building this network of people and relationships. And again, I can't emphasize enough why this matters. So, in our few years of working together, we generated 1.5 million in new public and private investment that none of these communities on their own could have gotten. So through the small contributions that our municipalities put in every year, I was able to take that and leverage it for larger federal funding. In 2020 alone, we got 1.2 million through our partners. And so, again, it was this ecosystem approach. It was this collaborative approach that was able to do that, especially during a pandemic. And then, I just want to share this quote from one of our businesses. He talked about this was in response to the data that we've been providing and the support that we provided to businesses. Last year, I launched the area's first campground on Silver Lake. The visitor survey and insight report produced by LGB played a major role in our decision to invest over $1 million USD in the Silver Locket project. I've lost count at this point how many businesses, how many tourism-related businesses have developed. And during the pandemic, we had 8 new businesses launch, all focused around outdoor recreation, this retail market that, again, was responding to the gaps that we identified as a group together over the years. And so just even that information, bringing people together, giving entrepreneurs the idea about what is possible, they've taken and run with it. Digital visibility, we worked very closely with Simi Geneseo and Digital Main Street, our partners in Ontario, to support businesses and improving their online visibility. You can see we started out with less than 40% being able to be found in an online search. When I started, of 270 tourism-related businesses, that's now past 72%. These are some of our stats from our website. Just this year, we've reached over 60,000 people coming to the site. That's an increase of 357% than when we launched in late 2019. We get people from all over the world, especially New York and Buffalo, though, are big markets. And again, we've become one of the top sources for information coming here. And then, I think, thinking about the impact that we've had compared to what we learned in 2017, we're now attracting higher income people to the area, which was part of our strategy. It wasn't about more beds on heads. It wasn't just about volume. It was about quality of visitor. And you can see from our latest survey that we're actually achieving that. And we have a growing alliance. Like, again, you know, we're working now across with 70 different stakeholders from 4 counties. Sometimes, you know, we've got folks and businesses in Genesee County that we work with. And so it's really been a tremendous, you know, opportunity to support each other. And again, you know, just talking about building a culture of collaboration, I think one of the hardest things that we do is building this leadership capacity. And, you know, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to read all of these, but, you know, this is going to be one from, you know, one of our mayors, Freddie Provo, who was the mayor of Mount Morris. He said, being part of LGB changed the way I was used to thinking about development in the village of Mount Morris. I realized the shift in my thinking during one of our more recent projects, the Route 36 corridor study. Initially, the scope was fairly limited to Mount Morris. However, we ended up expanding it to the town and village of Leicester because we could see that we were part of this larger system and transportation issue we needed to address. I don't know if I would have seen this in the same way a year or 2 ago. And Margaret writes from Geneseo, the most significant impact LGB has had on my thinking is that when looking at village decisions, I am acutely aware of the impact they will have on the region. We live in a beautiful area and maintaining that is important. Working closely with other communities on one vision solidified that. The data shared regarding growing economies and outdoor recreation and food tourism has also contributed to the change. As a village board, we agreed to keep the vision of LGB in mind when looking at the comprehensive plan, code revisions, and any other decisions that impact the landscape of the village. So, you know, key lessons learned, you know, I think one of the biggest compliments I ever got was that these people around the table, these are not your traditional economic development folks. These are people on the ground who are passionate, doing the work, and it's really about getting more voices to the table, getting different perspectives, and having them work with some of the traditional economic development actors, getting them connected to the planning, understanding how to leverage the studies that get completed, and access those dollars. And finally, these are just some recommended resources I'm happy to share with you and pass out afterward. But you have some resources at the front about rural development hubs and why they matter. This is a great framing to talk about the situation in rural and some of the different ways communities are, you know, kind of building that innovation infrastructure. And there was also a flyer up there for our Rural Rise Summit that RCAP co-founded. This year it's going to be in Emporia, Kansas, September 28th through 30th. Registration and other details are at ruralrise.org. We'll be having that registration information out soon, but this is a great convening of folks that, you know, again, are doing some of the most incredible, innovative work in rural across the country. So I'm going to stop there because I am right at time. If anyone has any questions later, I guess we'll have opportunities to discuss them then. So thank you for letting me talk about this amazing program and these amazing people. And I look forward to the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
We work in different ways and we serve different constituencies. And so for that reason, a lot of times it's tough for us to work with our neighbor, and even tougher the farther we are from one another. One of the things I don't see a lot, and I don't work as intricately with the, or as intimately with the communities as Nicole does, but one of the things that really strikes me about what I know about the Letchworth Gateway Villages model is I never got the sense that there was a lot of scorekeeping, if you know what I mean, right? So a big challenge in regional collaboration or in partnership is, well, you did something in Geneseo, when is it going to be Mount Morris's turn? You did something in Perry, when is it going to be Geneseo's turn? And I can tell you, and I see some heads nodding from communities that I work in around the region. I tell people right out of the gate, that's a deal breaker. It's a recipe for failure. True partnership is I succeed when you succeed and vice versa, right? And so that's a lesson that I took away from the LGB model. So thanks again, Nicole, and thanks to RCAP for allowing Nicole to spend some time here today. And so speaking of regional collaboration and of working together. Our next speaker comes to us from Empire State Development. And I was sharing with Greg as we sat down today that I came to New York about 15 years ago. I came right in 2008, and it was a tough time in New York State. A governor was leaving unexpectedly, not at his option in a lot of cases. A new governor was coming in. He was inheriting some pretty steep economic challenges, and effectively the messaging from New York State was pretty much doom and gloom from an economic standpoint. So much so that in Geneva, we received a bunch of grants over the prior couple of years, and my friend Doug Finch was working in the local legislator's office, and we went to meet with the assemblyman, and we said, well, we just want to get a read on where we are with our grant dollars. We're ready to start work. And he said, well, if you've got a contract for those funds, you're safer. When you have a check, you're safe. And it really woke me up as to the conditions we were facing. Also kind of prevalent at that time, a lot of you will remember this because I see some faces out here who certainly predate me in the local government landscape in New York. But those were back in the days of the sprinkle it around philosophy of economic development, or at least of economic development funding. Back to the scorekeeping idea. That same legislator told me, if you want to know where the grant dollars are going to go this year, put a map up and put a dot where all the grant dollars went last year. And wherever there's a big donut hole in between those dots, that's where the grants are going to go this year. They got it last year, so they'll get it this year. That's also a recipe for disaster, as it played out, it turns out. Just giving dollars because you didn't get dollars last year is not a great way to go at it. So in the ensuing years and in the ensuing leadership, this concept of the regional economic development councils came along. And I was fortunate to have worked closely with the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council. And the approach at that time, or the corner that was turned there, was prove to us that you can do it well and you'll be rewarded. And so the first step was invest yourselves, invest in yourselves, invest in great planning, invest in strategy, put your own skin in the game, and then come and apply for grant dollars. And we did that, and we were successful in round one. And then we executed on our round $1, and we were successful in round 2 and round 3 and round 4. And it was a measure of doing the right thing and doing it really well earns you a reward versus this sprinkle it around philosophy. And so I've been really supportive of the regional council model. Communities I've worked in have benefited tremendously from it and continue to do so. And I'm proud to call ESD a partner and thankful for their participation here today. So we're happy to welcome Greg Alpert from the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council office. Greg.
Perfect. Thanks for the great introduction, Matt, and thanks for everyone in attendance today. I'm very excited to talk through opportunities through Empire State Development. Many of you have worked with us in the past, and there's a lot of excitement on the state level for new activities coming this year, new activities proposed in the budget that we'll touch upon in the presentation. But a lot of what I want to talk about today, too, is the transition that Matt alluded to the community regional approach, the Regional Economic Development Council model that has really shaped economic development at the state level over the last 10 plus years at this point. We'll highlight some of that in the presentation, and we'll talk through a lot of different programs that are available, both for municipalities and communities to take advantage of, but also the local business community as well. Growing jobs, growing that quality of life benefits everyone. So we'll touch upon all of that throughout. So this is our 9-county region, the same 9-county region that the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council handles. Genesee, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Orleans, Seneca, Wayne, Wyoming, and Gates. That's our focus area. There's 10 regions in New York State. I'm based in the Finger Lakes office, so based in the city of Rochester, covering the 9 counties, working closely with the Finger Lakes Economic Development Council and identifying various programs that we can emphasize with our partners at the local level. A lot of the programs that we have vary to business direct programs. The Excelsior Jobs program is a for-profit business focused program. Our Economic Development Fund, which operates through both the consolidated funding application and outside of that as well, targeted both to businesses and also counties, municipalities. We'll touch upon that in more detail. The Upstate Revitalization Initiative, which is award that the Finger Lakes region got in 2015. It's a $500 million grant to the region, along with Southern Tier and Central New York, the 3 winning regions for the URI. That opened up a lot of more flexible programming. Traditionally, economic development was always job growth focused, how many jobs are coming, what the capital investment is, what the approach is going to be that way. URI, the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, opened up the opportunity for more creativity. And that's what I want to challenge everybody today is force New York State and Empire State Development to be creative. If you've got projects out there that don't fit the traditional economic development model, still reach out to us, still have that conversation to see what funding is available, what can we do to bridge the gap to help you. We've evolved over the last few years, adding new programs, new agencies, new partners, and we'll continue to do that to meet the needs of the communities. The Economic Development Fund, I'll talk in more detail. This is our primary grant program, operates through the consolidated funding application, targeted to for-profit businesses, but also municipalities, counties, IDAs. There's a lot of different ways that companies or applicants can utilize this program. On the capital focused, it's all about what the capital investment is, what the machinery equipment, what the construction renovation dollars are. Those are the key programs on the capital side. There's also the business investment, looking at the traditional items, what the average salaries of the new jobs, how many new jobs are coming in, looking at projects that can identify job growth, what can we leverage for that job growth in the community. Here's the next one. Eligible project costs, as I talked about, land acquisition, business machinery equipment, furniture, fixtures, equipment, any construction and renovation costs would also be eligible. Soft costs, any design and planning elements. In addition to the strategic planning and feasibility program that we have, there's also some planning components within the Economic Development Fund. You can leverage that. What's not eligible, training dollars, developer fees, different residential items that can be part of a project, but can't be where the Empire State Development dollars are going, since we don't touch residential directly. Additional activities from the Economic Development Fund, it's typically 20% of the total project costs the Empire State Development funds. It does depend application to application, so we encourage people that are applying, ask for what you need. If we are able to fund a project at that level, then the project can go forward if you're asking for the right dollar amount. If you don't need a 20%, come in for a lower request. It helps the project be more competitive, helps dollars stretch further at the state level, and more things get done. There's a $250 application fee with the Economic Development Fund program. That is paid after the contract is in place and signed. So any community, any business can apply, see if you get funded, see what level you get funded at, and then at that point, work through the project's incentive proposal to get the additional details. Once that incentive proposal is signed, that's when the $250 fee would be paid. But we work closely with applicants throughout the process. So once the program is launched, then we can talk through, as applications are in process, talk through what the project could look like. And after projects are awarded, we also can talk through with an applicant to see what has changed since you submitted and what has gone from there. Good question, Beck?
Yeah, Greg, so could you talk about match? It's up 10% real quick. I
Yep.
know it's a bad word for everybody.
Yep.
But it really becomes a very important part of how you do these type of projects. But those pieces can come to that table to support the commitment.
Yep.
That's what it-
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. For the Economic Development Fund, it's 20% typically from Empire State Development. Other grants from different agencies can help fill that gap, and then usually 10% from the applicant itself. So if you are able to piece together with potentially federal economic development agency dollars, Empire State Development dollars at the local level, maybe some other grants that you have locally, other state dollars are eligible to be part of this program as well, as long as there's a 10% coming from the applicant themselves. That helps that there's equity, there's skin in the game per se to get projects moving forward.
So if you take a look at it from that angle, it really, it can mount up. Does it make sense to these projects? Because you might not be able to get to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll touch upon this in a couple slides as well. But the one thing that we've worked to improve upon is that partnership, having the conversations early on, knowing that there's other agencies out there, being able to leverage dollars. When we're getting an application that just comes through our program, we're seeing it for the first time, it's difficult to massage the details, see what other funding could be available. But that's a very good point to see that planning aspect of everything. And we'll touch upon that in the planning feasibility program. Grant funds, there are some recapture terms. If property is sold within 5 years, there's potential for recapture. The same with machinery equipment was part of a project cost and that's sold, there could be some recapture. Job creation, if jobs are in place and then they end up getting laid off, there could be some recapture. So just something to be considerate of as projects come together that, you know, just when you do get your funding at the end of the proposal, there could be some potential clawbacks as we work through. Some of the projects that we've worked on the municipal level, Philion Webster to Xerox Roads, I worked with them on a grant for infrastructure improvements to the Xerox campus. Genesee County, working in partnership with the Antique Fancy on some infrastructure improvements in Genesee County to expand their business there. Some of the agriculture projects as well, Net and Sons just got funded in round 11 for a bean line expansion. Keystone Mills in Seneca County also expanding, got some grant dollars from Empire State Development for that. And then Select Fabricators is one I want to highlight because they are, they got both Economic Development Fund grants as well as our Excelsior program. And they were able to do that through the CFA process, capture both the tax credits as well as the grant funding. And that transitions right over to our next slide, which is talking more about the Excelsior Jobs program. And this may not pertain to a lot of individuals here, as this is a targeted business program, but it's something to keep in mind as you're talking to companies, as you're talking to businesses in your community, that there are programs out there for both job creation and job retention on the tax credit side. So it's to trade or retain jobs in New York State. It's a fully refundable jobs tax credit. So first to offset any New York State tax liability, and then any remaining credits would come back to the company as a full refund. The credits come over a 10-year period, so it helps with cash flow for companies each year as they're hitting their job creation milestones. They're getting new dollars each year coming through, help support those jobs, help add new jobs, and continuing that growth in New York State. The program is both job growth focused as well as investment track focused. So the company is not hiring a significant number of employees, but they are making a significant investment in New York State. They would still be eligible for the Excelsior program. It's 10-to-1 on the investment side. So about $1 million investment, could be $100,000 in tax credits associated with that, and scales up from there. On the jobs tax credit side, it's about 6.8% of the eligible salaries. So we would work with businesses to identify what the new job salaries that are coming on and work through to see what percentage of that we're able to reimburse through the tax credit program to incentivize that growth and keep that growth happening in New York State. There's different thresholds for job creation depending on industry. Most of them start at the 5 job creation milestone. So not a significant number when you're talking about a 5-year period. If companies just had incremental growth, they can still capture some of those program dollars, get a small tax credit each year, simplify the paperwork, helps them continue that growth in New York State, adding those jobs. Some of the projects that we've done, Magnatag, Pearl Technologies, Pace Electronics, Dialect, a lot of the Wayne County companies we just highlighted here. But there are a significant amount in the Finger Lakes region. This is our primary business development program. So I encourage everybody to take a look on our economic development jobs, our database of deals, see what companies will come on, what job creation is going, and then highlight additional companies that you're working with for us to see, are we talking with them? Is there growth opportunities? We're always happy to talk to companies, outline the new programs, see what their plans in place are, and see what we might be able to assist with. The other program which ties back to the Economic Development Fund is our Strategic Planning and Feasibility Studies program. This is a 50% match program for counties, municipalities, business and urban districts, local development corps. We've done a significant amount of work in the Finger Lakes region for counties and municipalities for economic development strategies. And this helps to position future capital projects that can go through the Economic Development Fund. And this is available through the CFA process as well. In some cases, communities have gone through the CFA, gotten a strategic planning feasibility in a phased approach. We're working with one that I'll highlight in a moment from Ontario County and the Village of Manchester Rail Yard projects for the Roundhouse. And Ontario County originally applied for a larger $100,000 level from the study. We weren't able to fund at that level, but we were able to do a phase 1 award, get some of that study work done. The following year, they came in for a phase 2 application, captured additional funding, and now they recently have been awarded a phase 3 to capture even more dollars to really get that going year to year, building upon the work that's already been completed. And then that may be one that transitions into our Economic Development Fund grant for some capital and investment for that property. There's a plan in place, there's momentum, the community's been engaged, and it shapes up well for a strong application moving forward. The strategic planning program, as I mentioned, is a 50% match. It's up to 100,000. There is 200,000 available within each region. So a lot of the projects that we do are on a smaller level. We've awarded $20,000 grants, $15,000 grants. So even if it's a small project that a community is looking at, this could be a good opportunity to get a consultant on board, get a study in place, see what could be possible. It's definitely something I would encourage applicants to. Salaries, wages, and fringe are all eligible. In-kind could also be eligible if the county or municipality is working on a project themselves, attending meetings, doing public outreach, travel for consultants. Most municipalities that take advantage of this program just contract out and turn everything over to the consultants to really manage everything, which works really well. Work through the planning process, probably a long time frame, usually within a year. But some projects are a little bit larger, they extend beyond that, and we're flexible in timing through this program. As I mentioned, the Ontario-Manchester Rail projects, we've also done a comprehensive plan with Genesee County, their 2040 strategy, which is underway, working with the town of Lima on a food retail study. So even things that you may think are outside of economic development, as long as there's some connection to economic development, could be a possibility through this program. And also looking at Wayne County, they've done a brownfield strategic plan. There's a recent business park study that's gone through the program as well. And then the city of Rochester is looking at a neighborhood plan for the Bull's Head district as well. That was just recently funded. There's also a lot of overlap of what I do with our Regional Economic Development Council and then the Upstate Revitalization Initiative Plan. Those are the two underlying documents that really serve the foundation of what our goals are on the economic development side, which is really involved now to community development, tourism, other aspects, and a lot of the spin-off programs that have come on in the recent years and ones that are proposed in the upcoming budget also fit in under the Economic Development Council model, which has been a great approach. The Upstate Revitalization Initiative outlined a strategic focus on key industries and areas where economic development should be based upon. For the Finger Lakes region, optics, imaging, and photonics, building upon that legacy, expanding that, but also agribusiness, tourism, also strong focuses for the region. So even going beyond Monroe County, what are the rural areas, what can we help grow for the agribusiness community, making connections there. There's a program I'll highlight momentarily on Grow New York that connects a lot with the agribusiness community, but really having the foundation in place so that we're making strong, smart, strategic investments into industries that are growing in New York. The Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which we talked about earlier, is really one of the strongest programs that's been going on in the last few years. Investing $10 million into small communities to encourage strong programs, strong projects, and really building upon a community development approach. We've been successful in the Finger Lakes. We've got a lot of strong communities go through the program, get funded, and it's a great opportunity for communities that have a strong community approach, that have a strong plan to identify some of the projects that would really enhance that and improve the quality of life. Through the DRI, it's really a strong emphasis on that community approach. The communities that have done the best in the scoring have been the ones that were engaged before the applications opened, that are always having those conversations, that have been able to plan, identify the key projects for implementation, and identify what the $10 million would unlock for their community. The clear vision is one of the primary aspects of the DRI. $10 million infusion into any area in the region would be significant, but it multiplies when a community has a clear vision of what they want to do with those dollars. How can they leverage one project to advance another? What private sector dollars are out there to support that 10 million influx from the state? Really building on all of that to emphasize the strong aspects of the community. It really connects with a lot of the work that's going on in the local communities and provides those funding dollars that are usually missing, getting that in to close that gap to get things accomplished. Synergistic projects is really the primary focus. Yeah, before I jump, let's go.
Just really quickly, with the DRI, I noticed last year you did something different where two communities in the regional economic development regions were allowed to got funding. Have you ever thought of doing, as I'm thinking about our trail town communities across, the stretch of 4 counties, would that ever be a possibility with that funding?
Yeah, absolutely. And there may be some unique funding streams this year that could be leveraged as well that we'll talk about. But one thing that we've tried to do regionally and even cross-regionally is emphasize the projects that are going to benefit the most amount of people. With the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, the 10 million, the real focus of that was trying to have a small area where we can influx a huge amount of money, 10 million, get a lot of things accomplished. But it would be great to leverage multiple communities, get additional dollars. I think there's a couple programs coming up on the rural side that may be able to do that. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that. That would probably be the best approach, but it's definitely a conversation worth having as we kind of advance. So in addition to the synergistic, it's the catalyst investments as well. Dollars in that are going to be multiplied. So a project that leverages a corner, may attract more people into the area, improve the quality of life, increase rents, increase the amount of residents downtown. It's looking at a variety of approaches to how to advance that downtown community, whether it's investment in the arts, adding tourism, whether it's improving quality of Main Street, what the readiness is, really trying to get those dollars in, working and multiplying as fast as possible, and having that clear vision enables the community to do that. Some of the DRI communities from the Finger Lakes, City of Geneva, as Matt is well aware of, was our inaugural winner of the DRI competition. City of Batavia, Village of Penn, the town of Seneca Falls, and then as Nicole alluded to, last year there were 2 awards. Since in 2020, the DRI program was not launched due to the budget, but we were able to leverage 2 $10 million winners in the city of Rochester and the village of Newark. So a lot of success stories in the region, all at various stages of the project. Most of the Geneva and Batavia projects are either completed or well underway. Penn and Seneca Falls already have their plans in place, are actively working. And then City of Rochester and the Village of Newark are actively doing the community meetings, getting those initial slate of projects unveiled, and that momentum will continue. Another program to transition over that I had mentioned earlier is the Grow New York program. And this came out of the Upstate Revitalization Initiative conversations of identifying what could benefit the agribusiness community and the agricultural community in New York State. The program area is 22 counties, so Central New York, Southern Tier, and the Finger Lakes. And it identifies different companies that are looking to invest in New York State. There's a $3 million bill in prize money for companies that are looking to move and grow in New York State. So this program lets people know that New York State's open for business. The Finger Lakes, Central New York, Southern Tier are key agricultural communities. They have assets available, and we've been able to attract international companies, companies that otherwise wouldn't be looking at New York State or have New York State on their radar into the area, infusion, private sector investment, adding jobs, connecting with local partners, and advancing a lot of different agricultural projects, which has been great. The Grow New York impact, going beyond just the job creation, it's that partnership between different companies. We have great farming community here that everyone's well aware of. Leveraging new technology, having those partners together definitely allows the agribusiness community to continue growing and evolving. And then it brings in new outside companies to give a different perspective, to encourage that evolution year to year. There's some other programs that Empire State Development works with as well. Market New York, which is our tourism focused program that has both capital dollars available for tourism investments in New York, but also working capital for marketing. So definitely something to look into if there's a tourism agency. A lot of what we heard from Nicole's presentation that could leverage some Market New York dollars, both on the working capital side or on the capital side to advance those tourism projects. Then there's also some low interest financing programs from Link Deposit. If there's businesses looking for loans, they can partner with banks to get an interest rate reduction with Empire State Development. And there's also the JDA Job Development Authority. There's a loan program for low interest loans for both machinery equipment as well as real estate. And there's also additional dollars that have been funneled through JDA to community partner organizations to get dollars out for the agricultural community. For the Finger Lakes, Pathstone is the entity that manages that program, but it does low interest loans for businesses focused on agriculture. And then we also have our traditional venture capital, startup New York programs that are still out there for companies that are able to take advantage. This is one slide I want to take a little bit more time on. This is both a good time to have a summit like this and also an unknown time at the state level. A lot of the proposed budget is obviously not finalized just yet, and it's working through that process. But what we've heard from Governor Hochul in the last couple of months is very exciting for New York State and the economic development community as a whole. There is potential for the New York Forward DRI Communities Program to target more rural communities in that DRI. A lot of details aren't known just yet, but that could leverage some dollars for those smaller communities that don't necessarily have a strong downtown core or a strong slate of $10 million of projects, but would be benefited by maybe a smaller investment into that area. Shovel-ready investments, some of that came out this week with focus on business parks, getting dollars in so that infrastructure is available. A lot of properties in New York State have been occupied. There's not a lot of buildings available for growth. So that shovel-ready investment program could help launch some sites, some business parks, get dollars there for infrastructure in place so that companies looking to expand have the property and the locations to do so. Restore New York is also in the proposed programs for State of the State. It's a program that I don't think has been funded since 2016, but that was able to get some community development dollars into the downtown for restoring some buildings, putting things back to previous use. So it could be another opportunity for rural areas or areas in New York that have those buildings ready for some dollars. Broadband still is a key conversation at the state level. A lot of money has been invested in that program over the last decade or so to get everybody connected to internet, broadband, and now it's closing those remaining gaps, getting more dollars out there, increasing speed, especially with everybody working from home now. A lot of the challenges over the last couple of years has been noticing who's got coverage, who's got outages, who's got access, and trying to separate those communities and bring them all together now of who needs funding, and hopefully the broadband initiatives will help solve that. And then there's a significant amount of small business assistance that was outlined in the budget. This started the transition from the previous couple of years of pandemic relief programs that were passed through from the federal government down through the state. And we've really been relying upon our small businesses statewide that the last couple of years have really magnified their efforts, their job creation, and a lot of small business assistance programs can now get dollars to them, keep their employees on file, encourage them to expand, and Empire State Development will be involved in a lot of that as well. So we should hear over the next month or so what's going to be funded, what agencies are going to take the lead. I suspect that myself and my colleagues at the Finger Lakes office will be very busy, but we're anxious to get some more dollars out in the communities and to working with everyone here on those projects. And that's my presentation and contact information. The one thing I want to emphasize again is really just the partnership. We always try to be accessible. Always feel free to reach out to me at any point in a project. If you're talking about a company, feel free to send a referral. If you're just trying to brainstorm some ideas for your community, feel free to reach out and we can identify what projects are available from Empire State Development or our other partners. We work closely with a lot of the other state agencies, whether it's Department of State, whether it's parks, whether it's DOT. We work closely with those entities to really leverage other programs as well. So we'd like to say that we're a one-stop shop. Reach out to us first, see what we can do, and we'll make the appropriate connections as needed. But again, thanks for everyone's time. I'm anxious for additional questions now or later. We'll go from there.
Yeah, we have time.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
The last slide, the New York Forward program.
Yeah.
That's kind of an exciting thing for us, small communities, or in the town of Wheatland, very small community in Monroe County. Is there a chance that that program is available this year, or is it something that's going to be developing over the next few years?
Yeah, so the timeline that we've seen so far is once the budget's passed, which should be early April, we'll get specific dates, but we anticipate that to be unveiled in April, have some application dates later in the year to work through that process. Communities that are already talking would definitely have a leg up on activities, but it would probably be similar to the DRI, probably at a much smaller scale. But there could be some benefits to that of not necessarily needing a $10 million slate of projects. But the DRI itself, we anticipate another round of that being available. So there could be some opportunities for small communities to either band together for a regional DRI, looking at maybe a $10 million application for multiple communities, or maybe a one-off application, or even taking advantage of the Restore New York program as well, if it's 1 or 2 properties, maybe just focusing on that. So definitely a lot of stuff will be coming out in the budget in the next few weeks.
And a follow-up. So the DRI, as I understand, is a multi-year process. What is the typical successful completion of investing that 10 million look like in other cases?
Yeah, so in the 10 million, it's definitely a multi-year process. Usually once a community is announced as a winner, it's about a 9-month turnaround for their initial plan. And that allows that community to identify the specific projects, identify where that 10 million is going to go. And then every slate of projects has a different time frame. Some of the larger projects in that slate, maybe a 3 to 5 year development horizon. Some of the smaller ones could maybe be a few different months. So usually each of the communities that have applied have a range of different time frames, just to build on the momentum. Plans launched, you have something in place, and then projects can be unfold 3 to 5 months, and then the larger ones a little bit further down the road. But definitely a great question.
Will you be making these slides available on the chance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If you, as long as, make sure you signed in. If you signed in, then we can compile and get up to everybody who signed in.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Yep. And definitely encourage everybody to keep up to date on the budget process. I'll know a lot more once that's passed of what agencies are going to be administering these new programs, what the timeframes are going to be. In some cases, there are different resource links already open. The site development program just launched this week. Not a lot of details are known, but there is a website to sign up for new information once it's released. So I suspect as the budget is unveiled and new programs launch, there'll be different web pages you can sign up to get those details as soon as they're outlined.
On your proposed program slide, you had a board item for shovel ready projects or programs. Is that Fast NY, or will there be other programs as well as that?
Yeah, so that is the Fast NY. So some initial details came out this week. We suspect a lot more will come out when the budget's passed. But there is also our Economic Development Fund grant that has done infrastructure projects in the past that could be an opportunity. But really looking at a variety of sources to leverage economic development. So if there is a project that you're thinking, we always encourage people to reach out. We'll find the appropriate program for the funding for you. So definitely reach out just with some ideas, some brainstorming, and we'll say, oh, that's perfect for the Economic Development Fund, or that's perfect for strategic planning, or maybe that's a better fit for the Fast NY, different opportunities.
Greg, I know that traditionally the ESD models don't include residential, and I believe Charlie might be speaking next, but one of the things that I hear from businesses when I'm speaking to them in our community is the need for affordable housing and or affordable transportation relative. So even though it's not, ESD is not residential specific, there's certainly a tie to that. I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration, because what happens, it seems like, especially with CDBG dollars, is it's so competitive. And I know even in our community, I think we have 6 different projects competing for that limited amount of resources.
Yep, absolutely. So we work closely with HCR on a lot of the housing projects in the region. There is some opportunity for residential through the DRI. Communities have been able to do market rate housing, upper floor housing, things like that. Empire State Development dollars can go to mixed use projects as long as it's not the residential component. So in some cases that helps projects become viable to leverage a residential aspect, and then a commercial that can utilize economic development. But definitely HCR has been active on their approach through their various program agencies, and we've partnered more recently with them on some larger scale developments that have an economic development component. In some cases, it's by design to help leverage multiple agency activities. So nothing residential directly from Empire State Development, but definitely we're more open to it, trying to be flexible and creative as best as we can.
Thanks, Greg. We really appreciate it. You know, as I mentioned, the economic development landscape, the economic development approach at New York State has evolved almost continuously since I've been here, and ESDs get more creative and more innovative and more open to new ideas every year. We heard a little bit about DRI and you know, as the Village of Newark's here, excited for them this year. And it was representatives from Yates County, where Penn Yan is going through its process. And it's a question that gets asked a lot because it's kind of a superstar program, right? A banner program. And so we hear a lot about it. But I give the same advice. I'll give a little plug for a podcast that we do called Building Stronger Communities. MRB Group does a weekly podcast. And we talk a lot about grant dollars and community development generally. And what we talk most about is what you have to do before the grant, right? So forget about the grant application for a second. Forget even about the specific project that's on your mind for a second. And try to pull way back and pull way up and start thinking about your community generally. And if you haven't done any visioning in your community, if you haven't sat down as I'll call it the city and town of Canandaigua, who got together a couple of years ago and did shared visioning, which created this really solid foundation, this really solid underpinning for taking a strategic approach at economic development. The state generally, whether it's DRI, CDBG, which Charlie's going to talk about in a moment, or any of the other CFA related programs, they're not really interested in funding a one-off project. You got one little project over here that's just been gnawing at you. It doesn't have much to do with anything else. It's not networked into the community or into the region's priorities. It's not going to be super fundable. And so what I tell people a lot is that these grant dollars are there to capitalize on momentum, right? There are lots of capacity building dollars that you can apply for. Greg laid out some strategic planning dollars that are out there, and CDBG has some planning dollars that are available to you. But generally, when you're ready to go for some construction level funding, you're going to move dirt on a project. The grant dollars are going to come as your momentum is going, right? They're going to capitalize on momentum. And so what I encourage all of you to do, if you haven't done it already, and we'll pretend like I'm not a consultant for a minute. So you don't have to hire a consultant to do this. Don't tell anybody else at MRB that. You don't have to hire a consultant to do this. Sit down with your community and talk about what you want to be. Talk about where you want to be in 15 to 20 years as a community. Spend that time. It feels fluffy, feels spongy. If there's any engineers that are rolling their eyes right now, it feels really touchy-feely. Without it, without that foundational vision, you're funding these one-off programs. And those reviewers at ESD and at HCR and these other agencies, they're gonna push those applications off the page, off the end of the desk that are clearly just funding these one-off unconnected projects. So I would encourage you to just engage in some real foundational work before you get started. So moving on to the next speaker, my experience with Charlie Philion in particular and with the Community Development Block Program it dates back all the way to my first days in New York State and even beyond that in other communities, other states, working with Community Development Block Grant programs. I believe, particularly in the area of rural development and especially in communities where the national objectives around low, moderate income beneficiaries are best served. It's one of the most versatile community development programs out there. There is a subject matter area that's going to touch something really critical in your community inside of these programs. And like a lot of the folks that have already spoken today, something I know about Charlie and about his team is that they're incredibly accessible. You have a project idea, you're thinking about something that you feel might be best served with CDBG dollars. They pick up the phone. They answer emails, they answer your phone calls, and they love to talk about the projects that are going on in your community. And so the fact that he's here today and we haven't traveled all the way across the state speaks volumes, and we're excited to welcome Charlie Philion to speak on behalf of the Community Development Block Grant Program.
So since before I had a schedule, does this mean I get more floor time?
You got all the time you need.
Okay, so I am thrilled to be here. This is second time in 2 years I've been able to get out of the office, so it's clearly over Zoom and WebEx and everything else. One of the things I like to do when I come out and do these events, and Matt knows this, I'd like to give you a little background about me. So if we just go to the, I have a couple slides in here today. All right. You blew my cover. So I'm still going to tell the story anyway. So a couple things. Keep this in mind. You want to be my best friend. Hendrick's Gin. And I'm an Letchworth junk, especially the peppermint. And if you can find the chocolate covered ones, I love them. So I did have a couple slides in here. I don't know, maybe I sent you the wrong version. One of the things I like to do, it's kind of one of my guilty pleasures, is Ancestry.com. Done a lot of work on genealogy, and I don't know if anybody else is interested, but I don't know if anyone is familiar with the name of Mary Elizabeth Burgos. Anybody, history people, so I think everybody in the room knows her. She's affectionately known as Mother Goose. So Mother Goose is actually a real person. She's Mary Elizabeth Burgos. She's from Boston. She's my 7th great grandmother. So I think it's really cool because now I know where I get my gift for storytelling and talking and everything else. So I guess we can get started. One other thing too, anybody know the name Nathan Philion? He's on the TV show Castle. He's my cousin. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'm going to, again, OCR is a big agency. We cover state federal programs. OCR handles the state federal home, CDBG, restore. And then we also have the F&D side, the Office of Finance and Development. They do the large capital projects. So we work with, CDBG specifically works with units of local government, cities, towns, villages, counties. Oh, quick. Who's had worked with CDBG before? I know Doug, and I know you guys, consultants don't count. Oh, yes. All right. So I'm not going to pick on anybody, promise, maybe. But we work, again, no paparazzi either, Matt. So CDBG, local units of government, cities, towns, villages, counties. The other programs, the state programs, the home programs, same thing, but we also work directly with LPAs, local not-for-profit. So it'd be a local housing agency, so here like Cuca Housing, Pathstone, who's the other big group out of Rochester, Bishop Sheen. So groups like that, but we can also work with IDAs and LDCs through some of the other state, the other programs. And then again, our funding, so it's kind of a pass through, money goes, CDBG goes directly to the local municipality, and then you work directly with your local recipients. So again, just one other thing with this is we also have the CARES funding, if everybody's familiar with it. So the state received $127 million through CARES. We're still trying to give it away. So if anybody has interest in this, is if you are what we call a high capacity not-for-profit, this is the one waiver we have from HUD with the CDBG program. If you are what we consider to be high capacity not-for-profit, we will work with you directly. So you don't have to go through a local government for that. But again, it's every single eligible activity under our regular program is eligible. It's on the PPR. It's the Prepare, Prevent, Respond to COVID, future pandemics. So you have to have a connection to this, the COVID nexus. And I'm going to get into this, the national objective still has to be met. And for CDBG, what I mean by the national objective is CDBG is a program for low to moderate income persons. So you still have to meet the standard for this. And then again, the other state programs, AHC, New York Main Street, access to homes, restore, MMHR, the Mobile Home Replacement Program. A lot of these, so I actually have 19 term sheets, and I was gonna print them off, and I was like, I'm not gonna carry that much paper with me. So I actually sent these to Rich, and I can send these you're looking at me like, did you? I think I did. I thought he did.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. I said, okay. Sorry, so yeah, so we've got the 19 term sheets. We can distribute those. I just figured rather than printing all the paper off, everything's color, but it gives you a lot of really good detail on each of the program areas for this. So these are generally all the activities that we fund. This is across the gamut for all the program areas that we work with. So again, just want to do a quick straw poll because I can tailor the presentation depending on the level of interest from everybody. My background, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I hope I picked up a thing or two, but my background primarily is public infrastructure. So again, just quick straw poll, if anybody's like public sewer, public water, storm drainage project, I don't know if anybody's interested in talking about that. We got one hand back there that's behind the pillar. Public facilities is what we call bricks and mortar. It's the community centers, healthcare centers, daycare centers, things like this. I don't know if there's any interest in that. Economic development, obviously, is the topic for today. My colleague Scott Mcnaughton is the program director for this side of the program. And he handles the ED, SV, small business, and micro enterprise. Private water, wastewater systems. What I'm talking about is I can go into mobile home parks and I can do private on-site septic and water replacement, and we can also work on connecting them to public systems. Manufactured housing replacement is another big area where we're getting some interest. The one caveat to this is I can work infrastructure inside a park. I cannot do unit replacement inside a park because under HUD's terminology that we have to work with, I consider that to be personal property because they don't own the land that it's placed on. This is a private, they own the land, they own the unit. We can go in and do a replacement and we can do the full cost of the replacement, including demolition and removal of the existing unit. And if the other improvements need to be made, septic upgrades, wells, utility upgrades, we can take care of all that. Propane tanks, there's a new requirement. If the tanks are with a certain footage of the unit, it has to be in a concrete pad. So there's additional requirements you have to be aware of. Housing, and it's like since I've been with OCR, my background has really been infrastructure, but I had a long stint with housing rehab. So again, it's everything single unit, multi-unit. It also covers, it doesn't specifically call it out here, but we home ownership, home buyer assistance is another activity that we fund. And again, the neat thing with CDBG is there's no cap on the per unit cost for assistance. So I did a house a couple years ago, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. We talk about now Clinton County. The cost estimate to repair the house was somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000. It wasn't going to fully address all the needs for the house. The owner was a double amputee in a wheelchair and struggled. We were to make some accommodations. So what we did in that case is the town agreed, tore the house down. We actually got through shit over because it was a historic house that was a little sort of a challenge, but we were able to tear the house down, included asbestos abatement, brought in a new ADA compliant modular unit with a full access for the owner. Just a great outcome. The cost of it was actually more. I think we ended up pushing $200,000 because we had to include the cost of the demolition and cleanup and some other things, but just it was a great outcome in that case for the owner. Of course, the other thing that we talk about is the community planning, and we'll get into that in a little bit too. So what I've broken this out by is by activity area. And funding sources. So for each of these, as we go through this, it's going to primarily identify the main funding area through HCR that we've got funding available for. So again, public infrastructure, drinking water systems, public sanitary sewers, stormwater management. These are all the big things. And one of the things I work with is the state co-funding initiative on infrastructure. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. I actually had the call with them this morning on the way up here. So it's my office, it's USDA Rural Development, Environmental Facilities Corporation, and then they also work with DEC and DOH directly, Department of State. There's a funding source that gets overlooked a lot, and it's the Northern Borders Regional Commission. It's a great funding source with, and also for the southern part of the region, there's also the ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's a great funding source. It's overlooked. So what we're talking about here is the funding limit is up to $1 million for infrastructure. When you talk about the co-funding limit, that pushes you up to $1.25 million. So what we mean by that is that CDBG, every single case, doesn't matter what it is that we're undertaking, I have to be last in. So you have to have exhausted all your other sources, and CDBG is being used because the other funding sources you can show their loans, and we're making projects more affordable, or you still have to get in financing. So I told you I wasn't going to pay on anybody, but Doug, I think that we did a project. I don't remember though that if it was straight CDBG.
No, it was split. It was CDBG, EFC. It was almost 50-50.
Okay.
For a low moderate.
Right. Right. So the money at the time of application has to be available and committed. So that means from rural development, you've got your letter of conditions, you've got a hardship determination from EFC. Project is listed on the intended use plan with EFC, and we know that the score is above and you're on the funding line. The other thing with the IUP, and on the infrastructure side, your project has to be listed on the IUP. For us, I have to see where you're at, because you can say there's no other funding. So EFC has their funding line, and if you're above this, you're going to you're eligible for grants and launch hardship, some other things. If you fall below the funding line, you can still borrow at EFC's AAA bond rating. So there's still, they call it the bypass financing. So again, we just need to see that money's available, committed, and joint applications at $2.5 million to $1.75 million. A couple projects, one you might, it's Niagara County, so I think it's outside of the Big Lakes region. I think it's Western New York, but we just funded 2 projects out there. It's not a joint project, but they're side by side. The town of Newfane has a wastewater treatment plant. So we're making improvements with the town of Newfane with the wastewater treatment plant to accept additional flow from the village of Wilson, and we funded the village of Wilson at the same time to decommission their existing plant and take that down and hook into the town of Newfane. So it's not a direct joint application, but it's one of the ways that we can work the projects out. The other one that we did this was several years ago in Allegheny County, the villages of Oliver and Richburg. Both villages were under a consent order. Their coterminous boundary borders. There are both water sources were contaminated. So rather than building 2 new separate water systems, this is, Matt, you just touched on this. It was a great approach because the 2 villages worked together, developed this new Pleasant Valley water system. It's a long time. It was like 5 years in the planning process before they were ready for funding, but it was a great outcome. So this is just, and again, just everything, get into the nitty-gritty if you want to, but it's any of those activities associated with public infrastructure, they're going to be eligible. What I can't do is maintenance. So 2 things specifically is dredging for reservoirs or dams, I cannot fund, and painting of interior water tanks. They're both considered to be maintenance items, and we won't do either one of those. So public facilities, again, touched on this. Healthcare center, sorry, it's like really liked there. I didn't realize it was so, maybe it's just me. Again, just anything, again, all of this has to be LMI benefit. So 51% of the beneficiaries have to be low or moderate income. So for Doug's project in the town of Canandaigua, they went out and did an income survey, and they were able to demonstrate to us that 51% of the residents, and it has to be person. So there's, with respect to how we do the income surveys, you've got two great people on your, with RCAP that I love working with. So Candace Palmer and Catherine Reese, they're great. So Candace actually worked with us several years ago with the co-funders and came up with this great income survey that fits all the needs, because you got multiple agencies, multiple users. Candace developed this great income survey that you can use for these projects and for infrastructure that addresses all these needs. But again, your survey universe, your response rate is based on the number of households in the service area. So you have to hit that response rate. The beneficiaries is based on the persons within those households. So you have to hit the response rate for the households. Total population has to be above 51%. So economic development. This is based on job creation. Job retention is eligible, but it's very, very tough to demonstrate. You have to have public written notification from the business that vote for CDBG funding. This business is closing down, everybody's going to lose their job. So it's job retention is tough, but again, this is all based on job creation. You've got the limits there. This is the one time where there's a specific match required. The other areas I just talked about, leverage is not required, but it does go a long way towards making your project more competitive if you come in with additional dollars. But on the ED side, we will fund up to 40% of the project cost for economic development and small business. Micro enterprise, we raised the limit on that last year. It was at 200,000. It was 200,000 is now up to 300. 50% of the money on the micro has to go to new startups. So again, it's, and micro enterprise is qualified as 5 or fewer employees at the time of application. Scott just sent me a couple, and I just want to go through these because these were really good projects. There's 2 here in the area. There's the Village of Arcade with Crestful Lake. They had 285,000 in CDBG funds. I think they're done with this. They were able to create 19 new full-time equivalent jobs. And the other one right here in Seneca County was the assistance to Seneca Dairy. There was a $600,000 grant. Total project cost was $1.8 million. They created 40 full-time equivalent jobs. So again, with the job creation, again, it's an LMI benefit, low moderate income benefit. The jobs have to be made available to LMI persons. Basically what that means is you can walk into the job with nothing more than a high school degree. If you require any kind of specialized training, licensing, permitting, anything like that in order to take the position, it's not eligible. We can't count that as created. But on the job training is certainly fine. We can help pay for that too. So this is housing. These are all the different areas that we can touch on. And the typical housing rehab, it's the single family, multi-family. We can do both. It's the housing rehab. We are going to start to more quantify some of the specific requirements with housing rehab. We're working with NYSERDA right now in my weatherization unit within HCR, looking for specific parameters. I worked as the consultant, so I know what it's like to be on your side of the table. I did that for a long time before I came over to the dark side on the state. But I used to go out to the houses and I visit. I loved Nana's. They were great because they would make me cookies and I was their best friend. But this is, I would tell them, like, look, at Titanic not going to show up here with the TV crew. It's not what this is about. This is an extreme makeover. There's things that we're going to do that you may never see. This is like true rehab. It's the insulation, it's the electrical, it's the roof, it's the everything associated with it. You also have to deal with lead-based paint. Again, everyone has these magical $25,000 caps on what they're going to provide for housing rehab because they don't want to get into abatement. $25,000 cap, the threshold for lead abatement versus the other. I don't want to get into a sidebar here with lead, but the threshold, the $25,000 goes back to the 80s when they started talking about making lead a requirement under the federal programs. And it was based on a gut rehab estimate from the 80s, and it's never been revised since then. So $25,000 for gut rehab for a house is not reasonable anymore. And what I can tell you is don't be afraid of abatement. You're going to run into it. It's becoming more and more difficult not to get into abatement. The threshold is $25,000 in federal assistance. So the way rehab works is you go out, you do your application intake and make the household eligible. You send out your housing inspector. They go out, come up with a scope of work with what they see the house needs. You turn that over to your lead-based paint risk assessor. So you've got your scope of work and they tell you what the cost estimate is for this. Maybe it's $20,000. Then your risk assessor goes in, they do test for lead-based paint, and it's everything that you're proposing to disturb on its scope of work. And the risk assessor also has to check chipping, flake, and peeling paint, friction surfaces, and it's everything: doors, windows, stair treads, cabinets, things you just might not think of as friction surfaces. Everything has to get tested. So now all of a sudden your cost is $35,000. Well, guess what? You're still not at abatement because you've identified clearly what the cost for the lead, clean up the lead, you know what that cost is. So you're able to actually deduct that cost from the rehab. That determines the threshold that you're at, whether you're at the interim control safe work practices or whether you exceeded that, you've actually gone above $25,000. Again, don't be afraid. CDBG again has no cap on the federal assistance. It's not unusual. I'm seeing more and more houses come in for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. One of the things you got to be careful about it's a caution. So if you get into housing rehab and the rehab exceeds 50% of the assessed value of the property, you're getting into what I call substantial rehab. You can still do it. It just requires additional things. There's additional improvements. There's additional work that may be triggered because of that. So it's again, don't be afraid of it. One of the other things I tell everybody, and I've done this. Some of you have heard this from before. When you're preparing these applications, again, cities, towns, villages, you're eligible to on the housing. You come in for 500,000. Counties can come in for $1 million. Just because you can apply for that doesn't mean you should. You got to look at your market, what's your demand, what can you reasonably accomplish. These are all 2-year contracts, so what can you actually get done in a 2-year time frame? So if you're going to be realistic about this, and you're really going to do true rehab, not just cosmetic, don't just spend vinyl siding on the house and throw some carpet down and call it a day. If you really get into the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of the house, maybe this is a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 unit project. That's fine with us. Again, this is just, we want to see the needs of the house fully addressed one time. We don't want you to have to come in and do a partial here, and then come back under the home program and do a little bit more, and then say, well, we're going to go to access and do something else. No, if you've got the ability, just come in one time, put the household through the process once, and just be done with it. And we know that we're secure there for a while. Manufactured housing replacement, again, is a big issue. Again, as I said, I touched on this, I can't replace units inside a mobile home park. But if it's on private land, we can do that, no cap. We do not do rehab on existing units. So if the unit is 10 years old or more, we're not going to touch it. If it needs rehab, you've got to go to another source. Lateral connection, that's from the curb stop into the house. That's eligible. talk about the home ownership. This is down payment assistance, closing costs, mortgage subsidy. The one requirement with this is, again, no local match is required, but the property owner, the buyer, has to have, so if the bank requires a 3% down payment, the property owner still has to pay half of that required down payment that the bank is looking for. Wells and septic, another avenue that I know that there's a lot of need on that. We've done a lot of these out in this area. Chautauqua County has done a lot of these with me, and St. Lawrence County has done a lot of these. That includes replacement, full replacement, engineering, so everything required for if you're putting a septic in. The other thing we do with this is if you are an existing septic and you're putting in a new system, new public system, we can pay for the decommissioning of the septic for the eligible homeowners and disconnect them from that and connect them to the new public sewer system. Same thing with the wells. If you're on private wells and you've got public water available, same thing. You can keep the well. We have to disconnect it from the house as a public water source. But the same thing, we can take care of that. The engineering required to do that and pay for the lateral connection. It also takes into consideration any internal plumbing modifications that might be required. Again, you're potentially triggering lead-based paint if you get into that. And don't be afraid of it. I'm just letting you know that's an issue. And then, of course, the accessibility improvements. That's any of the projects that we fund, we can do accessibility for anybody. But there is one program specifically, the access program is specifically modifications. It's a strictly ADA compliance program. So these are just some of the funding sources that are available. So the CDBG, again, as I said, cities, towns, villages, 500, counties are up to $1 million. I like the idea of the counties doing the housing rehab because it's tough. A lot of the smaller communities just don't have the capacity to take on some of the housing grants. So I'm not trying to put a burden on the counties, but you can kind of share the love, so to speak, and let the county take it. It's an easy way to get the units done. Tompkins County does a lot of this. I just talked about St. Lawrence County, Chautauqua County, Allegheny County. They do a lot of the countywide rehab, and it's a great way to reach a broader audience. Again, the home program, if you're not familiar with that, they can work with not-for-profits and local units of government directly. Main Street is through our office also, and there is the housing component that is available for the Main Street. CDBG, Home, AHC go through our own internal online system. It's called CDWL, it's Community Development Online. It's an internal system with HCR. The Main Street, even though it's a housing, you're still going to go through the CFA portal for that component with Main Street. So the access to home, again, these are small grants, but the thing is with access, restore home, any of these programs, you can leverage these with the other funding sources. When you're putting your applications together, just remember that you don't want to put this where you're just like throwing everything to see what sticks to the wall and hope that you get one of these grants. If you're going to leverage with multiple funding sources within our agency, you have to be able to clearly demonstrate that the need for each of the funding sources exists with your application and with the projects that you're undertaking. The Restore program, again, these are small amounts, including that they do have caps on the per unit cost. Restore is a specific program. It's emergency repairs for the elderly. Again, it's a good funding source. It's typically the smaller LPAs, the smaller housing groups that we work with that run the Restore programs. Manufactured housing, again, 3 sources. State CDBG, again, I have no cap on the per unit assistance. I can fully fund it. Counties are up to $1.5 million. Another reason to go countywide because you can get more money. Home program, again, up to 500, and the state MMHR It's a $500,000 cap. They have a cap of $100,000 per unit. Again, CDBG can step in to fill the gap between their limit and what else is needed. And then you could also do wells and septic on top of that. Ownership, this is a tough sell. Right now, we've got a lot of projects, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but recently Ulster County, Chenango County, Otsego County, I've had a lot of the communities, they've done great ownership, and I still advocate for this. But just with things, the last couple of years, with everything that's going on in the housing market, the last couple of years, it is just so hard for anybody to find an affordable house. We have to be careful because HUD also requires us to demonstrate that you're not getting into what they call over-subsidization. So I have a federal calculation for it's a mortgage affordability calculation, which is basically going to spell out the cost of the house, the repairs, the bank assistance, all the sources and uses. I had a project that it killed me to have to say no to this, but it was in the North Country. The counties had the project for 2 years. They've not been able to close on a single house in 2 years because they just can't find the houses for anybody up there. So they came to me with like a last ditch effort because their contract is going to expire next week. Want to put this woman into a house, $70,000, but it's going to need like $50,000 for repair, and there's all these costs. And I know we can do it. She's expecting a tax return, and she's got money saved up. And the reality is, when you're trying that hard to try and make something work, there's something wrong with the picture. So in that case, I had to tell the county, it's like, we can't do that. You're just, even with the repairs that they were going to propose to do on the house, it was not going to fully address everything the house needed. We are not in a position, we do not want to put somebody into a house that is not fully suitable, and we don't want to leave a future expense on somebody. So in that case, we had to turn it down. And again, some of the other countries are just realizing they're just letting these contracts expire. There is no demand, and we just have to let things go. It's not a black mark against the applicant when this happens. We know what's going on. So things just to think about. And again, the home program, our requirements are pretty similar between the two. So again, you can partner you can do homeownership assistance with me. You can partner with the home program for rehab, or vice versa, or use both at the same time. So we talked about the wells and septic, the lateral connections. So again, home specifically does not do lateral connections, but they will do wells and septic. Again, you can do this as a standalone. If you're coming in, Doug, I don't know, I'm going to pick on you again. Who's the other, somebody over here was from the village in Newark too. You don't raise your hand, we just funded you guys.
We appreciate it.
Just remember Hendricks. Yeah, so with the project that we did with Doug in Canandaigua, it was a SOAR project, and then we paid, what I was talking about before, we did the decommissioning of existing septics, internal plumbing modifications, and then paid to hook up the individual households to the system. So even if there's like a hookup fee, so I know sometimes there's like a $250 or $500 hookup fee to tie in, plus the cost of the actual construction work, we can cover all that cost for the eligible households. This is great. Usually you don't get somebody helping me. I can do this on my own. So community planning, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this. So the last several years, I know some of you have done community planning through my office, and just a little background, we've used what we call our administrative proceeds for the funding. So it's not a lot of money. We've kept it at 1% of our allocation, which usually comes out to about $500,000 a year is what we've made available for planning. But not that we can't do it or that we're doing it incorrectly, but we're going to actually switch that to a technical assistance. It's a better fit for us with HUD, and HUD would rather see us go this way. So we're still going to continue to do planning, but because we're putting this now under technical assistance, Whereas in the past, I could work with communities that were not 51% at the time of application, but they could demonstrate that the project was going to benefit a low-income population. It's going to make it a little bit tougher because the community, depending on what you're doing, may actually have to be low income. You may have to meet this threshold of 51% low income at the time of application. Where this is going to affect you is like on these assessments. So we do downtown building needs assessments. We do countywide housing needs assessments. It's tougher for that because you're proposing, you're going out and doing like this needs assessment and addressing like, here's what we need. Well, you're not really meeting a national objective at that point. Whereas with the engineering, you're going to have to show at the time of application, you know that your district, your town, your city, your village, wherever it is, there's no benefit. You're going to have to demonstrate at that point that yes, we are 51% low mod. This is the other big funding source that we have is the CARES Act. I don't know if anyone familiar with what we're doing with you guys? Yeah, I think we're talking to you guys for farm workers. Okay, promises. So again, this is forcing us to really be creative. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing that we've not typically done in the past. We're doing public services, and 22 years that the state has administered the CDBG program, we've never done public services, and it's literally what it means. So we're going out and doing like mental health intervention, we're doing vaccine pop-up booths, vaccine promotion. We do, in my list, I left it over there, but it's basically, it's like non-capital, anything that you can quantify as a service is eligible. So it's a big part of what we're doing. There's a lot of the stuff, we're starting to get some stuff in with housing. So it's being able to demonstrate that you're going to shelter safely in place. We just funded a big project in Chenango County. It's a $5 million deal. We're funding in full. It's a 18-unit low-income housing complex. And we're basically going in, it's the unit, the complex itself has been horribly mismanaged. It's under new ownership. It's working with we have a distress management unit in my office. So we're working with them. We're basically going in and taking the units out one by one and actually replacing the units. So it's another example. There's a lot of economic development. There's a big need for economic development assistance still. I know a lot of the businesses up front dropping through the Feds got their business loans. Again, we can continue to subsidize the businesses for lost revenue and trying to get restarted. Again, national objective has to be met. Let's try to do the other. And again, it's basically any eligible activity that's on that list of, and I spent all day just a whole seminar just on the eligible activities, but if it's an eligible activity, you can meet national objective, you can show that COVID nexus, you probably have a pretty good chance of getting funded. This is a non-goal.
We received this funding and we're almost out of it. Is there going to be a second tranche?
Where are you from?
Ontario.
Yeah, so one of the neat things that we're doing with this is reach out to Scott in Maryland.
Yes.
So one of the neat things that we're doing is once you're under contract with us, you don't have to come back in again for another application. So if you can show substantial progress and you can show that there's still a demonstrated need and demonstrated demand, and you've got businesses, you can sure you get the businesses lined up, talk to Scott, we can probably get you funded for additional funding without having to go back out to contract again. Yeah. This is also a non-competitive application process. So it's open round. So we give you the green light to apply. What the green light basically means it's a path to finance, it's a path to funding. So it's applications still in, we still have to look at it, we still have to make sure everything's met, we still have to make sure you've met the public hearing, you've given us the certifications, and if there is any other money that you can still show that everything's in place, it's basically, that's your path forward. It's just a green light and we'll walk you through the process. Now, what I can tell you is we are going to start pushing up our 3-year deadline with HUD. So the state really admits, it took us a long time to get this off the ground. We received the money in 2020. It took us a year to get this thing off the ground, and then we're still in full shutdown. We have to have, so the state received 127 million. 80% of that has to be expended by April 2023. And we're a long ways from that. We're starting to panic a little bit about whether or not, I think we're going to need it, but we also have to have, we have to be 100% committed in, I think it's 4 years, and we have to be fully expended in 6 years. So it's a substantially shorter time frame than what our normal competitive program is with HUD. These are also 12-month contracts. So that's the other thing to think about, is making sure that if you're going to come in, is it reasonable to presume that you can get through that 12-month contract period in time, and 12 months is from the date of award. It's on a rolling basis. Again, since I know who I sent these to, kind of got all the information. We've got a bunch of one-pagers on the specific areas with the different activities that we're doing with the CARES Act. So again, if you're looking at that, please contact us. It's a consultation form. So you've been through this. You guys, Wayne County's been through this. It's a simple one-page consultation form. Just fill it in. It starts the ball rolling. We'll have a call with you. If it looks like everything lines up, either Haley or Marilyn will send you an email saying, yep, you've got permission to move ahead with the full application. First Friday of each month is the deadline for submission for getting you on the board approval for the next month. What I mean by that is, I technically work for the state, but I'm technically not a state employee. I work for the Housing Trust Fund Corporation. So every action that we take, every award that we make, we have to send to the Housing Trust Fund Board for approval. And there's a process that we have to meet with this. So that's basically just, think about that as you move ahead. It's a timing issue. We'll walk you through that. But generally speaking, first Friday of each month, we'll get you on board for approval for the following month. And the 12-month clock starts ticking the day we make the report. All of these projects, everything that I've talked to you about is subject to seeker. Seeker's the easy part of getting through the environmental review. Everything is subject to NEPA. It's the National Environmental Policy Act. If you're thinking about doing this, I would encourage you to start that process now. Again, we will reimburse pre-award costs, and those costs directly associated, because I know it can be expensive depending on what it is that you're doing. Those pre-award costs, again, putting your environmental review together, will be eligible for reimbursement. You'll have to wait until you get through the release of funds process, but you can claim the funds at that point. So again, just quickly here, as I said, anybody here from Monroe County? So everything else I talked about today, you guys are not eligible for except for the CARES Act funding. So you guys are eligible for CARES Act, this and all the other state programs you can apply for. The CDBG state non-entitlement program is the only thing that you guys can't come in for. And then again, the not-for-profit. So again, housing groups, IDAs, LDCs, high capacity. We're trying to steer clear of doing capital projects with the not-for-profits. But again, if you are a high capacity, we will work with you on doing housing directly or any other capital project. How am I doing on time?
Yeah.
Okay, usually I have Chris Dodson from, I don't know, Syracuse University Environmental Facilities. They usually have him standing up the sideline once a month. Wrap it up. So again, these are all this is a large or a high level list of eligible activities. So again, my friends here in Wayne County, they're working on a farm program. So we specifically set aside out of the 127 million that we received, we've got 10 million set aside. More will be provided if needed. But minimum $10 million is committed towards a farm worker housing program. So eligible farms within your county that house their employees on the farm or on property, doesn't have to be directly on the farm, but it can be someplace else, but it's exclusive for migrant farm workers or farm workers. This is eligible. The way that we're setting this up is each, So I want to pick on you guys for a second, because you're sitting in front of me. So, one of the farms that they might have 10 employees on the farm that they're housing. Doesn't mean that 51% of those collectively have to be eligible. We don't look at that as like, if they're all in one house, we don't look at that as they collected as a single household. We're looking at each person, each employee is a single household. So if we can show that 51% of those households within the housing population are eligible, the farm is eligible for assistance. Again, I think there's a minimum of $300,000 application up to $1 million, and the counties can come in for higher amounts than that. Again, it's a great program. We're getting a lot of interest. It's I haven't actually funded anything yet, so maybe you guys will be first. But again, it's a great address. Again, it's New York State. It's agricultural based, communities. So again, it's something to think about. Special projects, just maybe you've got something out there that it doesn't like fit into one of these little pigeonholes, and we've got all these other activities. If you've got something out there and it doesn't clearly fit, just come talk to us. If we can classify it as what we call special projects, maybe there's a way for us to fit it in. What we have to do with CDBG is I have a list of HUD matrix, and I have to be able to fit your project into one of these HUD matrices. So again, sometimes it just requires delving down a little bit deeper into what it is that you're looking at and trying to qualify it under one of these list of 40 or 50 areas. Yep.
The third category you have up there, housing for safe shelter, what is that?
Pretty much any kind of housing we have.
Okay.
So it's just St. Lawrence County did this, they took advantage of it, and just they're identifying special needs. It's actually they're identifying special needs populations. So it's the elderly or persons with disabled family members. They're targeting them for assistance so that we can go in and do the rehab, target them for rehab, so that in the event of another shutdown or having to shelter in place, we know that they've got a safe place.
So that's the connection with.
Yes. Yep.
CV.
And it's the same thing that we did in Chenango County with the project that we just funded done, and I've got a couple others coming down the pipeline. So again, it's the same thing. It's the special needs. It doesn't have to be special needs populations, but again, you have to be able to show that this is to allow somebody to clearly, safely shelter in place. So here's our funding limits. Matt was right. Hopefully by the end of the day, I'll be everybody's best friend here because we've got lots of money to give away. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we just keep going here. So this is, again, your rubber hits the road. So again, I used to be a consultant. So I know what it's like to be on your side, but you have to think about the planning process. And again, we've talked about this with some of the other speakers. You have to look at this, what do you need as your city, town, village, or county? What do you need? But you also have to look at stuff regionally. And again, the example that I gave at the beginning with the town of Newfane and the village of Wilson, even though they're pretty closely connected, it's that type of approach because it made more sense for us, for everybody. It was more fiscally prudent for the village of Wilson to connect to the town of Newfane rather than trying, it's $750,000 we gave to the village of Wilson to decommission their existing wastewater treatment plant versus probably $3 to $5 million, I think was the estimate to make repairs to it to keep it going. So, but again, there's things that you have to think about with the infrastructure projects. We look at user costs. So my mayor has since retired, but I had a mayor in Schoharie County. We use a guide, RD does this too. It's 1.5% of your median household income is what we say is an affordable rate for your water system. And 1.5% of MHI for your sewer system is their affordable rates. So we went into this community in Schoharie County, and I was at the table, USDA was at the table, ESD was at the table, and their user rates were like 0.2% of MHI. They're really, really super low. And the mayor instantly said, well, we haven't had to raise rates for 15 years. And I said, well, now you have to raise your rates. So he actually raised rates, I think they actually doubled within like a 2-year period, but he still got reelected. So I'm not a mayor, I'm not running for reelection. I have a point that doesn't have to be careful. But again, that's an issue. So these are things you have to think about as you go through the planning process. It's not easy to tell your constituents, hey, you know, we're probably go for this money, but we have to raise your rates in order to qualify for that. Project cost, this has been a big issue the last couple of years. Huge spike in materials. There's still labor shortages. One project I'm working on, they just got an estimate for water pipe, 6-month lead time. You used to be able to just call up and get that and have it delivered. Manufactured housing, I'm seeing 12 to 18-month lead times for new units. So these are things you've got to think about. And again, existing systems versus new systems. One of the things we have to do is we have to comply with smart growth compliance across the board. So we should talk about this too, sorry. But one of the things that we can do, because this is economic development, is we can do infrastructure. You know, talk about doing infrastructure inside a mobile home park, but I can also do infrastructure in an industrial park. But it has to be for business related. So economic development, small business assistance, you have to have your business specifically identified at the time of application. They have to be on board. There's financials, performance they have to disclose. That is business centered. But again, if you have an existing park, and again, at the supervisor at the beginning, it sounded like their local industrial park was close to capacity. So if you've had somebody that wants to come into town, we need to expand, and we need to bring out additional store of water to entice them, and they're going to create 50 jobs, that would be eligible. I can't just go in that you want to develop an industrial park, the build it, they will come concept, we can't do that. So again, the planning process, this is one of the things that gets lost is not involving your local constituents. You got to talk to your communities, you got to find out what you need. I didn't talk about this at the beginning, but one of the things I just meant to do this before, if I can just get a quick raise your hands again. One of the things we're looking at is putting out an application for what we call SBA, SBS, so not small business assistance program, but SBA slums and blight on an area basis and slums and blight on a spot basis. So there's very specific defined requirements. I could spend another hour talking about that, but what we could do with this, if there's sufficient interest across the state, is work with you on demolition. So we're looking at urban centers. You've got an old industrial building, something that you own, and you can make this fit into an SBA, SBS program. There's funding available. So I just want to get a quick, we haven't decided yet this is going to go in, but if I just raise their hands if anybody thought that they would be interested in pursuing anything. Okay. Okay, consultants don't count.
Speaking on behalf.
Okay, all right. Again, it's national objective has to be, the national objective is you're met through this, making this SBA, SBS determination. Again, I realize no mayor, supervisor, county exec wants to publicly state, okay, we have a slum. You have to get past that. There's a specific basis for that. You also have to look at your state urban renewal law because they define slums and blight. So if you define that through New York State urban law and it still meets this federal SBA, SBS, then you potentially have a project. Again, it's just something to think about. And again, further consultants and engineers take that to your communities. It is something that we're looking at statewide.
That funding, if it happens, is there like a metric about dollars? How do we size the grant application?
We're not going to have a limit.
Oh, there'd be no.
No, we've got to find out of money that we're going to put into this, and then we're looking at making this as an eligible activity long term as part of the regular CFA. This is just a special one-off program that we're looking at to get started. We're not looking at funding caps, so we're just committed to meet all these parameters. You can define it, and you've got your cost estimates.
Yeah.
Again, it's everything, so, any kind of hazardous material, asbestos, oil, gas, petroleum, any kind of spills, anything else that has to be cleaned up, it's all part of it, plus the physical demolition, clear the site. Then at that point, the project is done. We're not interested in what happens, after that point. You're free to do whatever you want with it afterwards.
One more question, if I could. Is it possible for a community under a single application to do like a scattered site demolition?
Well, I don't have the parameters set up for something like that, but you're specifically talking about SBA, the slums and blight area.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
there's the specific, you have to be able to find that 25% of the buildings in that whole area.
Right.
Or each of those, yeah, and it's just tougher if you're gonna do it on a spot basis, that's a lot of work.
if you do it on a spot basis, it's more work than an area basis.
If you're talking scattered sites.
Right,
Within a
within a
single,
neighborhood that maybe had several properties that needed, you know.
yeah, that would be more of on an area basis, yeah. So again, start the process now. Again, the CFA portal is now open for this year. I'm anticipating a house around. The CARES Act is available for funding right now. Economic development, small business assistance is in micro enterprise. Those are all open round applications, so that it's available right now. But you've got to start the process. You have to start figuring out what it is that you need. Again, Matt, I think you touched on this, that you have to think about, you know, it's the SNP test. Is it going to pass the SNP test with my staff? Are you just trying to like get money for your community? It's no, just because money is available, don't apply for it. You have to have your project defined. You have to know what it is that you need, where you're going with it. Is everything else in line? If you're co-funding other things, there's environmental issues, you have to be ready to go. Beginning in 2022, for projects that come in for public facilities, public infrastructure, the housing program, your environmental review has to be completed at the time of application. Again, I realize that it's a big cost. Again, it's a gamble for you. If your project gets funded, we'll reimburse you. So that is the inherent risk, because you can go through the expense of completing the environmental review and not get funded. If I can't reimburse you for those costs at that point, if that's what happens. If you don't get funded and you've completed the environmental review and maybe there's a few deficiency points, maybe you fell just below our funding line and that it's feasible for you to reapply, we'll do the exit interview, the application review with you. We'll take you through the steps of what was deficient, and maybe you can reapply next year. You've already got your environmental done. As long as nothing changes, you can reuse that same process. So that is something you've got to think about in terms of being ready to go. Again, CARES Act is 12-month contracts. Everything else is 24-month contracts. Community planning is 14 months. So again, we'll just try to give you some guidance here. Again, we talked about this. I'm not the only funding source, and I can't stress this enough. I have to be last in. You have to be able to demonstrate to me in your application you've exhausted all these other sources, and there's nothing else out there for you, or that there's still a budget gap, or that what you've got available is just simply not affordable. You know, on the way up here this morning, I said I had my co-funding call, and one of the projects that came up is something that I'm working on, and RD was going to offer them a loan because there's room for grant CDBG grant dollars. But EFC said, okay, but they're eligible for hardship financing. So again, in that case, it's going to make more sense for them to go to EFC, 0% hardship financing, rather than going to RD with a 2.75% 38-year loan. So again, just everything you have to think about putting projects together. Still doing okay on time? Oh, running out. Okay, we're almost done. Again, I don't have unlimited resources. We have caps. The co-funding, we talked about that. Again, make sure your project is eligible. We have a link on our website. It's the LMI data tool. It's from HUD. And you simply type in your name of your community, It'll pull you up, you go in and look, you can see at the county's, village level, breaks it down by census tract block groups. You can determine at that point if you're eligible or not. It has to be an eligible CDBG activity. Again, these are the primary areas that we're looking for funding. RCAP, they are a great TA provider. And Matt said, thank you for the plug. I'll bring that back to my staff. And I like to hear that we are responsive. And that's, one of the things I like to hear about, and I get this from a lot of people, is that, yeah, we're a state agency, but we are responsive. We work for you. We want to make sure that you guys succeed. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. The Environmental Finance Center is another great group out of Syracuse University. They work specifically with small systems. So again, take advantage of these TA partnerships and use it to your advantage. So again, just applying for funding. These are the application sources. Again, most of what I'm talking about is CDBG, but again, any of the housing activities, as I said, they go through CDOL. If you've not previously applied as a entity through CDOL, you have to get registered in order to be in the system to open up an application. Use the correct application, check it. And again, honestly, this is a true story. You can't make this stuff up. When I was on the private side, one of my first projects, this is 22 years ago. I'm all, gung-ho and wrote this great application, submitted it, and I thought we did a great job. And after we submitted it, I found out I had the wrong indicator for the whole application. Still kept my job. And the application would not have gotten funded if I had the right name. Again, it's just there's little things like that. Citizen participation is a big issue. CDBG specifically requires a public hearing. There's very, very strict guidelines. We have absolutely zero wiggle room on this if you miss this. You have to publish a legal notice. This has to be a public hearing. It's not a public meeting, public hearing. It has to be held by the legislative body of the applicant. So counties can't pass this off to the planning boards or zoning boards to do this. It's the county legislature, the county board of supervisors has to hold meetings, city council has to hold the meeting. 7-day notice. So the date of publication, when it goes to the newspaper, is day 0. First calendar day after the date of publication is day 1. You count up 7 days, you can hold your hearing at that point. 2 additional requirements have to be met. 70-hour attestation. What we mean by that is you demonstrate to us that you take this notice to your front door of your town hall, you put it on the county website, you take a screenshot of it, and I'll show the date stamped in the lower right-hand corner. That 70-hour attestation shows that you made this, you did your additional due diligence, you published it, and you're also notifying people at least 70 hours prior to the hearing. It's kind of a reminder. And then lastly, Governor Hochul signed new legislation last year that you have to comply with that says 24 hours prior to the hearing, the subject matter of the hearing must be available for public review prior to the hearing. A couple of great websites. The HUD Exchange, it's for CDBG and home, but you can ask pretty much anything in there and you can find it. Do I have any Star Trek fans in the audience?
Do consultants come?
Yeah. So I used to, my staff said, you got to start with the old school stuff. So I used to have a picture of the Borg Queen at this point. And it's like, okay, it's just, resistance is huge. I'll just listen to me. So, yeah, again, I know we're going to do some Q&A, but this has been great. If we can go to the next, so the presentation that Connor will make available to everybody, these are hyperlinks. So if you just click on each of these, it'll take you right to the specific website for each of these. And then the last page, these are the program directors throughout. And again, contact us. I want to talk to you. So with it, thanks. Any questions or? Yep.
Has there been any consideration to raising the limit on the public infrastructure with the materials costs and everything?
Yes. Yes, I can't do it for this year. So one of the things, we have to do this on an annual basis. So the nuts and bolts behind the scenes with respect to CDBG and the home program is we have to do a 5-year consolidated plan. So we're in the middle of that. We submitted it first year of that was last year, 2021, March through 2025. Then we have to do annual action plan updates. So I've already missed the deadline, unfortunately, for 2022. What we did raise for this year is on the public facilities. It's gone from 300,000 to $1 million. But we are looking at raising that next for 2023 on the public infrastructure side. I don't know.
Specifically, and I don't want all the details, but I can tell you pipe cost is 4 times.
Oh, yeah,
what it was
yeah,
last
yeah.
August. And so, you know, I just had a public meeting last night, and the lady said to me, you want me to pay the debt service worked out to $1,000 a year.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm struggling with the groceries.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the material costs and all that cost of going up so much.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're aware of that. Again, it is something we're looking at for 2023 to hopefully raise the threshold limits for those. Right?
Thanks, John.
Yep, thanks.
We're going to move into break. We're going to take about 15 minutes. Okay, well, thanks to the diehards here. Let's see.
There are a few more.
Charlie, I might have committed you. Anybody who stays to the end gets a $50,000 CARES. So we're, you know, we've heard, I think, a lot of great information, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the state agencies who came out today to talk us through the funding piece of this, the public side funding piece to this. And then you heard Nicole this morning talk about some tactical efforts for achieving your vision. What we'd like to move into now is talking a little bit more about the why, about why investors might choose your community and what you can do to bolster your position in that equation, right? So Michael Ndolo and I have worked together in one capacity or another, probably for the last 10 years or so.
More.
Me as his client, way back in the day, and then most recently as partners here in this smarter local gov endeavor. And one of the reasons why I hired Michael when I was a city manager to advise us on the economic development side, and the reason that I partner with him today, and that I believe what he does is that he moved very quickly to the data and to the market efficiency of a conversation. Very early on, in fact, one of our first projects was a CDBG funded. One of our first projects together as consultants was a CDBG funded affordable housing strategy for Livingston County, and we went door to door in the towns and villages of Livingston County, talking to elected leadership about their hopes and dreams. And Michael is the person behind me who, every time I get excited about big possibilities and big hopes and dreams about what we can get done, he grabs me and reminds me, we're going to get done what the market is going to allow us to get done. And so our opportunity as local government leadership is to help shape that market and to do what can be most effective toward achieving our success within the confines of the market. And so I expect that the presentation you'll hear from Michael today will be grounded in market reality, but give you some insight on how to be most competitive when you're working to achieve your vision. So please welcome the Director of Economic Development for Smarter Local Gov, Michael Mcnaughton.
All right, thanks, Matt. So I've had Matt as two different kinds of bosses. First as a client boss, and now as an employer boss. So it's been a good relationship so far. I'm actually up here in two roles. I am the Director of Economic Development for MRB Group, but I'm also, along with Connor, directly helping Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council as their CARES Act Economic Recovery Coordinator. You've had the pleasure to do that for about a year and a half now with Richard, Emily, Jennifer, plenty of other people out there. I do sincerely hope that you got both coffee and a cookie or so, because your blood sugar levels are probably going to drop if I start talking about too much data, and hopefully that'll help even you out. But I did want to talk about, since the theme is rural economic development, I wanted to talk about specifically competitiveness, how to identify it, and then what to do with it on the back end. And I do have the pleasure of speaking after Letchworth, Gateway Villages, and our funding sources, because it ties in, some of the examples they use and some of what they said ties in actually very well to what I'm about to say here. So, okay, you just have to answer. All right. So very briefly, we'll go over what makes rural economic development special, what makes rural communities special. We'll look at a little bit of data. I promise it's very data light. I'm not going to go too deep into there. I'll talk more about the uses and the applicability of the data itself. And then we'll go into two practical applications. One being, how do you do planning for rural economic development, and how specifically you can do site advancement. I'm talking about economic development sites, of course, if I can advance those. And on that last note, I will say, I was at the New York State EDC conference along with several other members of several people in the room, and the governor showed up a little bit as a surprise. She wasn't on the agenda, and announced the Shovel Ready program. And as she said, and the Shovel Ready website is going live, she first said, and the Shovel Ready website, and she started squinting at the new Commissioner of Economic Development and said, and the Shovel Ready website is online. It is online. So I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I do very much hope to do so. I think there's going to be some interesting, if it's anything like the previous program, I think there'll be some interesting opportunities for everybody in this room to think about. So what makes rural? Well, the obvious one is low population density, right? I mean, it's sort of a truism to say that. But I will say the one thing that we have to think about in addition to population density is to say economically, they're not particularly dense areas either. And so in an urban area, you might have a lot of spillover benefits or a lot of cluster advantages. You have a little bit less of that in the rural areas. And so you have to do a little bit of extra work to get something done. Each of the regions is determined by the unique characteristics. It's not a one size fits all. We heard a great example of a tourism-based economic strategy, which is great. There are ones that are agricultural based. There's ones that are related to specific industries, and each community has to think about it individually. And then I will say finally, in terms of strengths, I always like to tell folks in a rural area that you need to look at the most proximate urban area, because almost invariably your economies are linked. And so part of knowing thyself is to know what your own community looks like, but also what's our big urban area near us look like, right? What is that? What's their economy being driven by? And then how can we use our natural resources as part of that? So here's the downer, and we just have to be realistic, right? And you guys know all of this. This is a map of counties, and in red, there are two shades of red. The dark shade are counties that are rural, that have lost employment, and there is a lighter shade of red that you probably can't see very well, and that's rural counties that have gained jobs. So the first thing to take away is, yes, 6 out of 10 rural counties did lose jobs. That's a pretty clear across the nation. But there are rural counties that have gained, and there's rural counties that have maintained. And I think for Upstate, really what we're trying to do is maintain, right? And there's strength in maintaining, and there's ways to renew while maintaining. And I'll talk about some of those strategies later on. A couple more bits of bad news here, or I should say less positive news. These two lines, the line in gray are urban areas, the line in blue is rural areas, and or non-metro areas, and it's the employment count. So this is 100%, this is the Great Recession. You can see that the urban areas have generally bounced back, the rural areas are about flat. I again don't think that this is bad news. Rural areas have recovered, but they clearly haven't grown nearly as much as urban areas. The next slide says about the same thing. The headline here, of course, the red line is rural, The blue line is urban. And the headline is, of course, that we're not growing at the same rate and at the same level. This is income. But I will say that the other thing to think about with this graph, this shows from year 2000 to the present, is that incomes have grown from 28,000 to 41,000. That's not insignificant. So it's not like you're losing ground. Even adjusted for inflation, you have increased in median household income, just not as fast. So there's some good things in the data. Now, we did look, and I promise you there's only like 2 more data slides and then we're done. And then we'll move on to other things here. But I will just say, we did look just for fun. Ontario County is the first one. Next one's Yates County. Seneca County is the next one. We looked at income characteristics and growth rates, and the trend is the right direction. You can see all the trends go upwards, right? We would not want to have a downward trend. Certainly, there's variations. Your income level is 51 in Ontario. It's been lower in Yates and Seneca, not surprisingly. But again, the point here is that no one's declining on an absolute basis. You might be losing ground with respect to a faster growing metro, but we're still doing okay, right? And there's some strength in that. So one of the fun things, and I promise there's no data here, this is just, you can just look at a bar chart, is that each of the counties does have its own unique characteristics. I'm not going to go into detail about what they are, but you can see in Yates that food processing, manufacturing, plastics, and wood products are clusters that are there. Now, the first one is education and knowledge creation. That's mostly going to be your educational institutions. So I'm just going to skip over that one to say. So, you know, you can look to say, what are the strengths in my area? How can I build on those things? Next slide is Ontario. There's a bit more diversity in here. Again, we start with education, but heavy machinery, production technology, plastics, transportation, logistics, communication equipment, vulcanized and fired materials, not a Star Trek reference, downstream metal products, downstream chemical products, environmental services. So they have a little bit more to pick and choose amongst. And then here in Seneca County, we have kind of in the middle, a few more than Yates, a few less than Ontario. And you can see there's there, again, production technology, heavy machinery, food processing, financial services, recreation, and small electric goods, which I was kind of a little bit surprised about, and printing services. So why do I talk about data? It's because you have to have a good foundation before you start thinking about it. And the foundation is what gets you the strategic planning. So strategic planning goals are pretty much the same no matter where you are, no matter what you do. It's maintaining and increasing the quality of life. The standard of living of an area is generally a factor of its productivity per worker, productivity of its industries. We measure it in wages, we measure it in jobs, we measure it in economic output. And it is, of course, what it allows your municipal government to raise revenue necessary, right, for your operations. So we think about the goals and we say, okay, what is it that we can now? We get quality of life, we get jobs, we get tax base out of it. Now, how do we do it? This is text that you're not going to be able to read from where you are. And I'm not going to read it, and these slides will be available to you afterwards. I just want to cover a few things. So this is more food for thought and strategic planning. One of the things that I definitely want to say right up front, and it was something Nicole mentioned, is in her case that her communities had to figure out what they were first, what their vision is, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the steps for strategic planning. But assuming that you already know what that is, you really need to look at things like, the first goal is to support the rural landscape. And what it is basically is what are the resources in your economy and how are you able to maintain those resources? There's a few different things. Now, one of those things in this far right column is renewable energy. There's definitely some pros and cons. There's some folks that are in support of that. There's some folks that are not. But what I can say is that some communities have used it as a way to support agriculture. And there's some different techniques, and we actually did a research paper about this. How can you use your solar policies to promote agriculture? There's some agrivoltaics, which is a combination of agriculture and solar. There's ways to promote good solar development, which means to say to exclude prime farmlands, prime farm soils, I should say. or to at least minimize the imprint on that. And there's some other things that you can do with respect to removal. You have your right to farm policies, you have a few things around land preservation, particularly I believe are important in the rural area. And then you have things like campaigns to buy local, and you have some options for zoning and planning that you can use to your advantage. For example, if you want to expand housing, you might think about reducing minimum acreage for individual lots. There's different tools that you have that you can use once you've decided what you want to look like. The next goal here is helping places to thrive. And just a couple comments here. Really, this is about quality of place, and we've heard a lot about quality of place already. I'm not going to repeat what other folks have said here. But I will say historic preservation is one that we've seen be really helpful, in particular for quality of place in two ways. One is the historic preservation contributes to the quality of place, which obviously brings people in when they have pretty buildings and so on like that. But we're quite aware of the financial incentives, both at the federal and state level, that make projects otherwise not feasible. And historic preservation in that particular way can really move the needle on it. A couple of things, just, we have the typical Main Street things, we have parks, we have streetscape, and I'm encouraged to see some of our funding sources allow for additional streetscape improvements in the Main Street program, for example, that you can build in if you end up getting that grant funding sources. I see some nodding heads out there. And then the focus, and again, this is quality of life, focus on adaptive reuse as opposed to greenfield development. If you're aware of the term gray field, which is not a brown field, a lot of people like brown fields. Green field is virgin territory. Gray field is something in between. It's maybe a infill development in a rural area, in a rural downtown, or it could be repurposing a building for an adaptive use project. And then finally, the third bold area, before we talk to a little bit more specifically about what you guys can do, is the new places. So even in areas that are not necessarily growing in absolute numbers, I have a little theory. I'll share it with you. It's the 4 villages theory. I told you this one before, haven't I? Yeah, okay. And this is what I love to say, because I've seen it work so well in so many communities. You might have a place that's level or actually declining in population. And hypothetically, I have my 4 villages. And something happens, and you visit one village, and it's actually starting to kind of disappear. A couple villages are hanging on, and you go to the next village, and wow, it's actually in great shape. There's some new buildings that are going up, a bunch of the second and third floors of existing Main Street buildings are occupied. You see some life and activity. So my 4 village theory is to say, if you get really clear about what you want and you get really intentional about how you act, even in a zero growth or declining population setting, you can be that 4th village. You can be the place that people want to be. And the difference really is your vision and your devotion to those quality of life items that we talked about earlier. There's some strategic planning related to creating new places. There's also some concepts around mini urban centers in rural areas, and I think that's fairly obvious. Well, I don't know if I really count this as a mini urban in a rural setting, but something similar to what we're in right now are actually, I've seen all across the country, there's a big resurgence actually in these mini urban areas. It's a place that people want to live. They don't necessarily live in the great big cities anymore, but this is a place where you can live. And people have had a little bit of a negative attitude for a while, saying, hey, well, we haven't really seen anything in a long time. I actually think the demographics are shifting on this one, and the data is certainly supporting that.
They also say, use the term micropolitan.
Micropolitan.
For those regions that.
I love that one, yeah. It's the everything that you get with great quality of place, and you're not paying 3 college tuitions for an apartment, which I love. Marketing is another aspect of this creating places. This is all going to be available. Again, I'm not going to read through all these things, but I'd encourage you to at least look at that if you're contemplating. So let's put it into context. So if you're one of these communities and you're saying, hey, Michael, this is all great talk, but what do I actually do, right? I would encourage, just from a step-by-step point of view, you do have to assess some existing conditions, right? And a lot of communities do have a handle on this. Some communities don't. There's data that's available. I would encourage you. We talked earlier about some strategic plans for downtowns in particular, that money's available for that through a couple different sources. And if you can get that done, that's great, and tell you what you have, what you're good at, maybe what your weaknesses are. And that visioning, what do we want to be, what's really possible? And then what do we want to be based on what's possible? I like to set realistic goals. Some people like to shoot really high. I prefer to shoot something I know I can hit, or at least reasonably believe I can hit, develop those policies, and then of course you've heard all about the securing the funding. So this is kind of that strategic planning process in a nutshell. I can give some more, if people are interested, I can give some more detail about each of these steps. But what I wanted to do, again, just to get a little bit more concrete, is to say, okay, let's say, and I think it was perfect that the supervisor this morning that opened up said that their industrial park is just about filled, because the example I have is the site advancement process. Let's say you go through all the way through here and you realize, hey, our big constraining factors, communities, we don't have any good economic development land, right? We simply don't have that anymore. I'm going to walk you through, I'm not saying everybody should do this, but if this is the case for you, these are the actual steps that you can undertake after your strategic plan is identified that as a goal, and you've decided, okay, we're ready to move forward and make some targeted investments. The example here is Schoharie County. We did this recently for them, where they identified the fact that they have almost no land available for economic development. These charts that you can't see are about the industrial real estate market, okay? And the only one there's lots and lots of lines on here, and one you probably can't see, but there's this fine little green line, and that's the vacancy rate. And what you can see here is for industrial property, the vacancy rates have trended down to about 2% as a current. This line here is the current. This over here is asking rent and average rent. And you can see all the fundamentals are pointing in the right direction. So if this wasn't the case, and they didn't have enough industrial land, I would still say, hey, be careful, because the market's not going to support it. But here we have a couple signals. They know that they don't have enough space, and vacancy's low, and rents are rising. There's other graphs that I can use to support this, but this is just the example. When we talk to them, and we talk to their realtors and the commercial developers, and knowing the area, they're kind of in a funny zone where they're part of the Mohawk Valley, but they're also part of the Capital District. It's a little hard to place them, but the clear market demand was for large spaces near an interstate that could support a logistics and distribution site. Why is that? Because there's almost all of them have been gobbled up, number one, and number two, given the characteristics of Schoharie County and the workforce, this was actually a pretty good match. And it turns out we found a couple sites that could fit the bill. Schoharie County is in the ARC area for good reason, because it's very mountainous. We found a bunch of sites that we actually hiked up in these shoes and these pants that were very muddy and extremely terrain unfriendly, but we did find some flat spots. So the question that was asked to us was, well, okay, so what do we do? This is the site advancement process. And I know some of you in this area have had a lot of experience in this exact thing. But Economic Development 101 for sites is you have to minimize risk to the developing party. And risk is all about knowledge, right? A developer or a business is not going to want to come in and spend 6 months figuring out that something doesn't work, right? You have to answer not a lot of money, but you have to answer a lot of questions for them. And that takes a little time and a little diligence. But Economic Development 101, you have to minimize risk. Water, sewer, gas, electric. Is it there? What quantities are there? What are the limitations? If it's not there, how long will it take us to get there, and how much is it going to cost to get the infrastructure there? Those are all questions on the infrastructure side that are great to have answered and available. Land is the use that someone wants to do allowed? Is it fully permitted? How much pushback are they going to get thrown into the meat grinder at 10 public meetings and then get run out of town? Is another way to say it. What's the process to get to approvals, right? Those are all great questions to ask. Next slide. A few more, and this is the thing that we learned with Schoharie County, was that there was significant topographical, if you will, considerations. Wetlands, slope, stormwater management is the difference between your total acreage and your developable acreage, right? So it's not enough to say you have a 100-acre site. I have seen a 100-acre site that had about 3 developable acres on it. Okay, so we need to know what the developable acres are. And then for some folks, can they fit their building on there? And if they do locate there, will they be able to grow into the future? Finally, the one that seems to be the most pernicious, because we're dealing a lot of times with private property owners, is who's the owner? Are they willing to sell? And are they willing to tell you how much? And are they willing to enter into an agreement with you with respect to that? That can be one of the trickiest parts of it. If you are successful, again, if your community needs this, and if you decide that this is your priority, and you answer all these questions, you're in a great spot. What do you do next? These are the 4 steps that you're going to do next. All right. The first one is pre-development. That's everything I just talked about. Answering all the questions that need to be answered in order to see if this is a viable site. If you take nothing else away from this presentation about site advancement, maybe you're slumbering off into your sugar-induced coma, but gain site control next. Before you spend serious engineering money or serious infrastructure money, you gotta lock that site down. That's the biggest mistake that we see going into this, because what happens if you don't own the site and you make $1 million investment in the site? Who can answer that question? What happens if you, the community, makes it $1 million investment to develop a site that isn't yours? The price of the site goes up by $1 million. You haven't solved any issues. You've made somebody else's site more expensive, right? Site control is very important. I would say site work happens after that. That's when you do whatever your engineer tells you to do in terms of utilities and site grading and road prep and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, a strong suggestion, if you get to this point, would be the best positioned sites in New York right now are the ones that are already through the seeker process. Who has been through the dark arts of a GEIS seeker? Anybody? Okay, a few people have. This is a GEIS, sorry, it's a little tangent here. GEIS is a generic environmental impact statement. It's basically saying, we have a plot of land, the community's had a discussion about it, we know all these different things about it, we have all engineering costs done, and we have a variety of uses that we would like to see at the site. And any of those uses get put into the get put into the PUD, which becomes the subject of the GEIS and more acronyms. And at the end of the day, what happens is if someone shows up with one of those uses that conforms to the GEIS, they're done. They go right to the building department. They basically go right to the building department. You might have to swing by the planning board to do site plan approval, but at that point, the scope of review is very, very narrow. And then you're at the building permit process. That's gold. So for the folks in this room, what's your role? Typically, we're seeing more and more of this happening at the county or regional level, but the town and village are critical because you have the land use controls. You're going to be the ones doing the PUD legislation, and probably you'd be the lead agency on the seeker, not necessarily. So I do see counties typically as the lead. The landowner by their site control agreement is cooperating. The village or the town or the city in that matter does the PUD legislation. You get some incentives from our various agencies that are with us today. The IDA gives some tax abatements, and then you might even market the sites. So that's one example of something you can do as a rural community to really move the needle. And I know that there's definitely some demand there. So with that, I have no idea where I'm at time-wise. A little bit, okay. I'll take one question. I don't know, 2 questions. Let's see what it is. Anything? If not, you guys have been great. Thank you.
I will say that the example that Michael used on walking a site through the process or identifying critical sites and moving them through the process, the building blocks of that example are the same building blocks that we recommend if you're doing a downtown assessment, an affordable housing assessment. The process is the same, and it really is transferable. Again, quiet. We got to stop the recording, but you don't always need a consultant to do it. I tell people, mayors and town supervisors, put it on a legal pad if that's what you got to do. But walk around, understand the landscape, understand what the assets are that you've got, and create a plan to activate them. So thanks, Michael. It's super helpful. I think really applicable across the board. And then our last presenter today comes from our hosting sponsor here, the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. The work that we're doing on CARES, our COVID support, COVID recovery support, is a teeny tiny sliver of the vast work that's done by the Planning Council at a regional level. These guys are the OGs, the original regional entity, predating the cool REDCs. They've been at this a lot longer than most of us. So they've gotten really, really good at it. And I appreciate the partnership that that's brought this program to the table, and that's advanced a lot of economic community development around the region. So please welcome Richard, who's got some information on other programs.
So I ask for your forgiveness straight away. Straight after this, I'm going to head off. My parents are flying in from New Zealand. It's the first time we've seen them in 3 years. So to be a good son, I probably should be at the gate when they get off. And secondly, thank you very much to all the speakers today. It was tremendous listening to you all. You bring a great experience and initiatives to the table for us all to consider. One thing I take away from everyone, all of the speakers, is the idea of partnerships. And as I talk about today, I'd like to emphasize on that need for partnerships. We can't achieve successes most of the time by ourselves. So Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council was originated in 1977. We are the EDA's designated economic development district. We oversee it on how I explain it, the local feet on the ground, and trying to support our communities, identify potential funding opportunities, and projects that will bring true success to the region. Our council is a 10-member council made up of the 9 counties and the city of Rochester. We have a governance structure with an executive committee made up of representatives of those 10 members. We have a full council, and one of our advisory committees relates around economic development, and they meet on a quarterly basis to provide insight and at the county level and private organisations, the insight that's valuable to GFL achieving its goals. So what is a regional council? We're a resource. We're here There is 4 of us. We're professionals and we're here to facilitate that conversation at that regional level and provide technical assistance to everyone. Regional councils, our 188 municipalities, non-profits, everyone that makes up our region. We provide a place for a forum for the community representatives to gather and address issues that transcend the municipal boundaries. You know, what Wayne County is dealing with next door in Monroe or Seneca, they're all dealing with the same issues. So looking at it collectively, there's benefits in that. And we're a voice towards, you know, Washington and Albany. You'll see there it says Concord. I like this presentation. I've yet to be able to, this image, and I haven't yet been able to really adjust it without it looking like that. So I'm open. It's not created by me. Thanks. So as I say, we're a team of 4. Jenny and Emily are here today, and Rob Richardson is at the village of Lima today in a code enforcement training session associated with the Clean Energy Communities program. We work on a range of regional issues such as infrastructure, water resources, land use, housing, and community development. As part of that role as the EDD, it helps, we undertake that function, and it helps us, the EDA helps fund our processes each year to enable us to be a resource for our counties and our local municipalities and our local communities as a whole. We utilize, you know, we're at the forefront of trends, and we utilize all these new concepts to achieve long-term successes for our communities. So here's just a range of programs that we undertake at GFL, economic development being one of them. As the EDD, we develop and review the comprehensive economic development strategy. So that's the economic development blueprint for the region. And it's made up of consultation with all of you.
And a requirement for federal funding.
And the requirement of federal funding. Under this funding from the EDA, we also provide technical assistance. So if you have any matters that you wish to get assistance with and support with, you know, this program helps us fund that. One of the projects we're working with a number of counties and communities is around broadband, and it's, you know, been identified one of the major issues facing our communities, and it's not just our region; it's across the country and it's across the world.
I did mention this, everybody else left, so they don't. But broadband is something that we can do through the CDP program. So it's just something to think about. If you could tell my benefit, and the other thing to do is for individual households, it might need equipment for broadband, we can make that too. But just a big initiative as well. We're going to help the repairs.
Thanks, Charlie. So one of our key programs, and it's not totally economic development, but this program and these initiatives are growing businesses out there, is around clean energy. So between Emily, Jenny, and Rob, they oversee the regional approach to the Clean Energy Communities program offered by NYSERDA. So they're working on a daily basis with local governments, local communities, help assisting them in reducing any energy consumption, clean energy use, adapting to climate change, and a number of other goals that are in that clean energy sphere. Other programs are around risk assessment and mitigation strategy development, stakeholder and public outreach process, just engagement. We're here to help all parties communicate clearly together. Transport related and housing studies. We assist on a 10-year process with the census. and we assist the workforce development organizations achieve their goals. So the SEDS the purpose is to kind of define how the region proposes to create jobs, foster a stable and diverse economy, and improve quality of life for all of us. It's all about coordination, and it helps identify, with those projects in mind, potential funding opportunities. And the document is aligned with the Finger Lakes Forward document that Greg spoke about from the Regional Economic Development Council. So yeah, we're technical assistants. We provide technical assistance. So we're here to support anything that your community is dealing with, struggling with, succeeding with. We're here to be a partner to help push things forward. We support municipal planning services like comprehensive planning, because that is another form of that local blueprint. Without that, you're not planning for the future and for your community's success. And Main Street revitalization, we see some of the community, most all the communities that Nicole was talking about have really jumped onto that, and that's some part of their reason for successes. So reflections, I'm wondering, today or via email, based on all the good resources you've heard from our other speakers today, is to help inform GFL how we can, what those issues are, what those topics are, and we can work to identify ways that we can support each of this. I think between the state and consultants and GFLs, we're a great partnership, but we all can help you all achieve your end goals. Questions? Yes.
Are you going to offer some of the same information at the next larger conference? Because I found it very valuable.
Definitely, and a part of this process, I think, there'll be feedback and what you would like to hear, a larger audience, and you'd like to hear more about in more detail. Please let us know, and we can work that into the future program. So yeah.
Why don't you tell them about the other summits that we have?
So we're looking at holding one again in the middle of June on the western side of the region, to then try and pull more communities from that side and try and be inclusive, because we know we're definitely at the eastern side of the region, and we're going to hold another one, a mini one like this, and there is the intent in September to hold a region-wide one, probably in the centre of the region, and have additional speakers and a bigger, yeah, they're still in the planning stages, but yeah, definitely I'm sure our speakers would come back, or recommend other, especially at the state level, other entities, other departments that could really provide insight to local communities and achieving their goals. Yes.
So I'm not from your region, actually from Central New York region, we meet springs across the lake, and I appreciate being invited to come here. Right from the beginning, from Nicole talking about teaming together with other communities, makes you sort of think about how this works. Hard to get through everything without, it's nice to get all these slides later and go back through and say, what is I really trying to key in and took notes the best I could. I appreciate all the speakers. I already worked with MRV on a number of different things. But I learned something here that I hadn't learned before. So that's a good thing. And again, I appreciate the invitations.
Thank you for joining us. It's only an imaginary boundary there, so yeah.
We have an island.
Just some comments, and first of all, thank you again for leading this, and that you guys are gonna be doing two more. Emily just whispered to me, I wish our municipalities had been able to make it. You know, for us, you guys have been incredibly instrumental in bringing people like us to the table that are not part of the kind of establishment, and in providing us with a voice where, you know, to be totally honest, and again, I'm like, this isn't a criticism, but New York State has a very kind of, you know, difficult, you know, for smaller community and small rural communities to have a voice at some of those regional economic development councils. You know, I have to keep telling my communities, listen, if you want to go through the CFA process, if you want, it's what Greg was saying earlier, we need to know about this, but they don't know that they need to be at those meetings and in those settings. And so I just think you guys have been really good at bringing other voices to the table. And that would be what I would want to see kind of going forward. I mean, we've got our, you know, you have something like, you know, Monroe County, where Wheatland is a rural community, but they often get left out of a lot of the incentives for other, you know, so there's this like kind of patchwork. And so the more I think we can, you know, maybe work with the EBDs, with the planning council, and just kind of try to figure out these solutions, because it just seems like there's a lot of resources, but you know, how they get applied in different places, it's like completely overwhelming for us to navigate. And so, you know, having that support, having these convenings, having the opportunity to be around people who are doing this work in different ways, I think is incredibly helpful.
Thank you. And I think there's a point in time where sometimes you have to stop and then reassess the approaches that have been undertaken and how we can best move forward. So, you know, there's all these situations that, yeah, we're not always aware of, and you know, the impacts they have, and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard at the table, and that there's different ways to achieve an end goal. So yeah, the idea of the SEDS is, as a community document, it's a living document, it's your document. And if I'm here to plug something, you know, from an economic development point of view, is your input is valuable. As your region, it's your success. So as the blueprint, it helps define where the direction for the region from an economic development point of view. And I just ask for you to be involved. And it's not try and help us make it a document that just doesn't sit on a shelf. You know, it's a digital shelf now, but it could be a digital shelf, but it's, you know, the idea of making it a living document, and it's something that is utilized going forward.
Thanks, Richard. Keep the question energy rolling. And I would say, Michael and I were just joking that we sometimes we just say things in meetings and they end up on agendas. So we call this the haymaker, because you can literally just throw anything you want out there. And the original intention was to have you be able to ask any of the presenters any questions. But I would certainly say, if you heard a neat idea from another attendee, or you just have a general observation about economic development in the region that you want to throw out there, it's rare that we'll have this collection of all of you practitioners in the room at the same time, as Nicole just pointed out. So does anybody have a question for a presenter, or just an observation that they'd like to throw on the table and hack at for a little while?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Charlie.
I think the takeaway from perspective of the CVP program is really, really flexible. There's a lot of different ways that you can make things work. There's obviously, you know, federal rules, regulations you can't meet, but there's a lot of different things, and you can really be creative and still stay within the rules. Across the board, we can make things work out. But again, you've got to contact us.
Yeah, my takeaway was the same for ESD and for HCR. if you got an idea, if you got a program or a project that you've been bouncing around for a while, don't wait until the CFA application. That's the wrong move. Particularly if you're thinking about being creative or you're thinking about doing something that's a little outside the box. My leadership calls it, we got too cute with that. Like, if you're going to get cute with a federal or state program, go talk to the program managers ahead of time and say, here's what I'm thinking. And they might trim you up a bit and say, if you just turn it this way, you'll probably be able to wedge it in. But if you just throw it on a CFA application, you're going to end up in a pile. And sometimes that pile moves in such a way that the ones we know about and the ones that are clearly aligned get approved or get more consideration. So as I said, Charlie and his team are accessible. ESD is accessible. Genesee Finger Lakes is an incredible resource. Reach out to them and bounce ideas around. That's my same takeaway.
Is that, again, maybe we come from the private sector, and work in the state side. I know it's about, I know we put these applications together, but I don't be sometimes really honest with you. I think it's not going to work. I'm stoned down.
Yeah.
It maybe there's a way forward to make it work. I was talking about project he's working on in a day one. But if this thing is just, if you're not invited, you're not going to support it up for project. It's clearly not meet all the eligible criteria. I'm going to tell you no bother. If there's a path forward, I'll work with you to develop it.
Nicole, do you have an observation?
Well, it's more, I think, something I just wanted to open up listening to Michael's presentation about, how we're defining, prosperity in rural areas, and we start talking about, things like, job creation, and, some of the, I think, things that I've experienced in supporting businesses and other organizations trying to get funding from some of these traditional sources, just technical assistance for some of the businesses have to be making $1 million a year. That is not what our small businesses are doing in rural areas. And, even like this is, some of the federal funding talking about, innovation and high impact growth and things like that. It's like, but in a rural area where you don't have population, we don't have the numbers, we don't need those same things, what are we going to be doing as, this kind of coalition and around these summits to start talking about how do we redefine success in rural, and what does that mean? So I was watching your study about how are we defining that? What is the kind of dynamism around entrepreneurship in these areas? Is it just straight up, we're looking at household incomes, or are these other things that are kind of going into that matter or should matter?
And it's gonna be defined differently, right? In every community or in every partnership. I joke, my wife thinks I'm the world's worst economic developer because we don't have an Applebee's in Geneva. I was there 10 years and I couldn't get an Applebee's. And so that's her idea of economic development. It's really crappy, good food prepared quickly. Good in the neighborhood. But Michael, So yeah, I think that's part of that visioning that has to take place. That's what you do in visioning, right? Is establish measures of success. And if you can do that, I think LGV is a good example of a collective, right? A group of organizations getting together, a group of communities getting together. But even at a molecular level, we're going to have to define our own success, because the other deal breaker that we typically lay out there is we don't change our vision for funding sources. We don't change our approach to meet a federal or a state funding source. And so if we're going to redefine success, we're also going to have to redefine where we go for resources in a lot of cases. What do you think, Michael?
Well, actually, the segue is I have learned about, and I'm participating in a relatively new program that's actually perfect for rural communities in particular. And it's on the affordable housing side of things, and it's through HCR. It's not a CDBG program, but it's through HCR. It's called the Small Building Participation loan program. Okay, big, long acronym. But what I love about it for rural communities is that it's really hard to do a true affordable housing project in a small community, right? Because they tend to be quite large. If you go to a LIHTC, the local housing tax credit auction, almost all of them are 60 to almost 70 units, right? Which is probably more than a small downtown is going to be able to handle in a rural area, right? But this program, and it's also very competitive, it's very expensive, you have to be very sophisticated. This is a great program through HCR that's really geared toward 10 to as many as 40 units in an adaptive reuse situation. And you get $50,000. It's essentially free money. It's a loan, but it's essentially free, $50,000 per unit. So if you have, and the other thing that I think is really neat about this program is that it's not limited to just 60% AMI, this area median income. A lot of the low income housing programs are 60% AMI. This is 80% AMI. Okay, so you're going to hit a large swath of your communities will be eligible for it, and it's a program that's easy to get into, and it's paired with senior debt from the Community Preservation Corporation. You can get your entire project, almost all of your project financing from these two agencies to do the project, and it comes as a package. So if you haven't heard about it, or if you have a project like that where someone wants to do a project, they should really look this program up because it's a resource that I wouldn't normally point people to. But for this group, it's a really keyed into this particular group.
Is there a deadline for that?
Rolling. Yep. Madeline Fletcher at HCR is my contact there. I think there's other people that work at the program, but Madeline Fletcher is the person to talk to.
Two of the projects that I talked about, there's funding already actually using PLC as part of financing. So easily match up with.
Other ideas? Anybody want to dig deeper at something? Yeah.
Charlie mentioned that there was money for broadband program somewhere, but I don't know if you mentioned program.
But I can do it through the regular competitive CDBG program, but where it's easy for me to do it right now through the CARES funding. Again, your service area, if you're going to put up a power, what they call this, I'm not a technician on the broadband windows. But is it? No, it's the
microcell.
Yeah, like microcell is on. You put it on top of a telephone pole or building or something. As you define exactly where the signals can reach. I know that signals don't know boundaries, but if your intention is to service a specific census tract or block group, we can fund that. Right.
So it doesn't be a terrestrial program.
No, yeah. But we're doing it with a few of the counties in Chino County and the city of Norwich is the one that we're doing that's citywide with broadband. Yeah, you said that will not benefit. Like I said, the flip side stage was the physical equipment in the house making for broadband.
So if you're doing the broadband, can you bring 5G into a small community?
Yeah, whatever you need. Yeah, we're not going to set the parameters of how you do that. It doesn't have to be wireless or be fiber, whatever you bring it in. It's if you're doing broadband, it's the intention to make it accessible to your residents.
Broadband and affordable housing are definitely the topics du jour. Does anybody have a particularly creative or unique ARPA story? Anybody using those funds in a really creative way?
So I listened to your podcast.
Oh, good. www.smartradio.com.
My board said, well, we don't have to follow those four infrastructure that are there, so we're going to spend $20,000 on new signage at the beginning of the village, and we're going to spend another $20,000 on benches and garbage cans to match the new DOT debacle downtown, the black iron and stuff, and so, they said, well, you can't do that, but you know, here's the parameters. I said, no, I watched a podcast. I'm reliable source. So we can now go up with you economic development that has to do with making things better within the village. So I specifically, I went other places first, but after I listened to you,
Good.
I had a fall back.
Good.
So we decided to take that money and spend it on making things look better first. And we're a tourist community.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That's great. Yeah, I know CDBG is going to accept a recording of the podcast as attestations later on, so don't worry about that. I was just thinking, you know, and we joked a lot about it. The creativity part might have gone by the wayside, might have been relegated to the wayside when the funds just opened up. I heard like well, they're not horror stories, but people who were really thinking creatively about how to finance infrastructure a year ago took the ARPA money, and as soon as the rules came off of it, they put a bonus pool together for employees, which is fine, or just recovered last year's losses. When you were really thinking creatively, people were really thinking creatively, like Bud's talking about streetscape or marketing or branding, things that you could have done with that ARPA money.
Like, just one more thing, with the rest of the money, we put it into a pool for downtown businesses as grants.
Oh, I love it. Well, Sue, you had something?
In Ontario County, we use some of our money to hire a consulting firm.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Small businesses apply for the funding that's available to them.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
So I just want to point out, so when they're choosing the ARPA, they talk about the co-funding coverage on the infrastructure site. You'll see they come from RD, EFC, but if your ARPA funds that are committed, we'll accept it as co-funding that potentially puts into the higher fund limit.
That's great.
It won't wait too fast.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I can't speak for our communities, but the guy from Victor who came to our summit, who had used Victor had used the money to hire, him as a kind of outdoor recreation trail manager and coordinator. And so, they've got an allocated person now for that. And that would be, we'd love to have our county support that. 7,000 people use the Great Scottsdale.
Right. Yeah. We were even under the older guidelines, we were trying to steer people in. There was a lot of talk about parks and trails and the ability to talk about outdoor recreation as mitigation of future spread. And so we were dancing on the edge, but then once the final rule came out, that enabled someone like Perry, who I know was looking at the Silver Lake Trail, was able to cover some funding gaps there.
And I know some of our counterparts in Vermont have used the federal disaster money and some of the ARPA funding for emergency response for their Trail Finder website, because that was the only tech platform in the area that could provide notifications. So they provided notifications on behalf of all of the municipalities, all of the parks, all of the things about risk. And so we're able to get funded that way.
So in thinking about, as Michael and Richard pointed out, we view this as the first in a series. We want to do a couple of more mini ones around the region to make sure we get access to everybody who wants to come, and then a larger one. Are there topics that should be at the top of the list for the next session? Speakers that you've seen around the region that you think your peers might benefit from?
Mackenzie Scott. Rick Hauser would be good.
Yeah, I was thinking about Rick on a couple of different fronts. He's got this Main Street LLC concept. If you haven't seen that, it's a neat approach at tackling kind of challenging buildings using community-led investment. And then also he's just a really smart guy on a lot of different fronts, from public engagement to urban planning and architecture. He'd definitely be a good ask. USDA, yeah, rural development.
He's not in the region, but Kevin Neary, since we heard about it.
Kevin Neary.
He was one of the mayors over there, but he's kind of on par with
Rick, yeah.
What about, like, I know you brought up NDRC earlier.
Yeah.
The ARC.
Oh, that's great. Yep.
You know, and I know their funding round typically opens around.
they've had a summer internal training for the basic agencies coming up.
Yeah, because, you know, even in my conversations with MBRC, this was the first time we've ever applied because Livingston County became eligible. And they indicated they are very interested in potentially partnering with the ARC because Allegheny County is under that, and then, you know, of course, we're up here. And so, you know, having, I think, more conversations between some of those funders about this regionalization approach and, you know, possibilities for that for communities to band together to get more funding. Related to kind of the Rick Hauser LLC model, like impact investing, the work that RCAP is doing right now with the Milken Institute, which is a public finance organization, in the EDA, in looking at pre-development. They want to begin to unlock some of that venture capital, impact investing funding for more flexible capital for communities to pay for pre-development and things like that, because that seems to be some of the bottlenecks. We're doing a lot of the learning right now, but you know, Dan Carroll, who's, you know, been speaking pretty openly about all of this over the last year, the need for pre-development. He might be good, you know, for
yeah, absolutely. That's good. I mean, obviously it's a hot topic for the governor. And I know we've been working with Genesee Finger Lakes on some pre-development, you know, readiness conversations. So clearly a good fit. Yes, sir.
What about somebody from Greater Rochester Chamber, GRE?
Yeah, GRE, Greater Rochester Chamber, those are both good ones. And then there's the new, I just read about this. What's the initiative? Rock something. Obviously well branded. Rock the River, where
it's the marketing thing.
well, it's the first time I've seen in upstate New York the work to attract it's a piece of this, but it's the work to attract remote workers. So Rock 2025, that's it. Where they're putting incentives out there to attract folks from other states, other regions.
And that might be good too, because they're supposed to cover our.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You're on there. All right. Well, we got our speaker. Awesome. That's great. Yes, sir.
Also, Nicole is one of a couple of speakers to our Genesee Valley Trail Times Initiative that have been either the Genesee Valley Passage or the folks from the Yosemite area. So also an area. So maybe given this agritourism focus, and then maybe there's one of these slots would, and given the nature of our area, you guys have been really successful in Finger Lakes area. We need a little bit more of the agritourism over in the western end. But maybe a speaker like that would be good.
Yeah,
some success.
best case, yeah.
A region that's already done something.
I love that. It's a great idea. Yes, sir.
Kind of the feedback on the outdoor recreation side, that's what the Genesee Land Trust, where we have a lot of public land that's available for recreation, but the land trust, whether it's through easements or their own ownership, we have land that's accessible to anybody in the public for recreation.
Love that. Land trust and land banks both would be good conversations. Awesome. So there is an experience, a post event survey, is that right?
There is, yeah. It's right on the back of these program packets, QR code. It should bring you right up to a survey.
So we'd ask that all of you fill that out and definitely and we've captured the ideas you've laid out here today. But if you've got additional ideas or want to reinforce or expand upon an idea, we'd love to hear it. Genesee Finger Lakes website is
GFLRPC.org.
GFLRPC.org. Go there, all the contact information for Genesee Finger Lakes staff is there, program information is there. So please do visit that and take advantage of all that they have to offer. Anybody else have a plug? RCAP.
RCAP.org.
RCAP.org.
And actually, I'll just say that, one of the programs we got funded from Wells Fargo is the Open for Business Hub. One of my colleagues who's not here today, Madison Wells, actually works in this region, but this is a whole online platform, completely free, that provides businesses with one-on-one management consulting. This is done through our partners who are CFIs. Really, really good support. We have webinars that are hosted every month, and then we have a new online course series that's about to kick off. But the one-on-one consulting is a pretty sweet thing for free. This is specifically for rural community. So that's on our website under the community.
Oh, that's huge. Other plugs, other places we should visit? Program.
Question. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between residents and municipality.
No.
I do a lot of advocating for community engagement and residents being aware. Kind of puts me in a precarious spot because I'm also part of the municipality. Can you guys bring this show to citizen groups and businesses? Our particular town, I mean, I've done polls, I've done surveys. I don't do this good job. I do it because I love my community and I want to see it better. I have identified data that people want things, and they've highlighted what those are. They've highlighted the things they want preserved, the things they need changed, what needs to be brought to improve it. And ironically, it's just what everything you guys talked about was falling on that survey. Pretty active, but there's a huge gap. The residents want something, but then there's no way to bridge it because that relationship isn't there. Or we've got new elections, now we've got new administration, and there's a lot of lag in there. I mean, a lot of what you talk is something that can be done from a resident initiative. Do you guys ever think to bring it on the road to citizen groups?
Yeah, I was going to say, for some reason, there's something sticking in the back of my head about resident capacity building. Who's got funding for that? Anybody? or can provide technical assistance.
Well, I mean, we can talk about LGBT's model. I mean, part of what I did is because there's so many things to get into, and this is actually something Rick talks a lot about is, three legs of the stool of this, kind of alignment between the municipality, the business community, and community groups. And what we did with our whole cooperation structure, that is built into our MOU. To be part of this alliance, you have to have a community group that is going to be, kind of your boots on the ground. Whether it's a Rotary, whether it's a historical society, you make up a Main Street Association, and that the agreement, however, is with the municipality, which requires then the community group and the municipality to be constantly talking to each other. And same with the business. Usually that community, like the Main Street Association, also is like a local chamber. So, we kind of bake that into the structure of, the agreement, because then they have to talk to each other, they have to know what's happening with each other.
Maybe one of the things you could add as a topic is how to build those relationships.
Yeah.
Because they don't happen. I mean, the best intentions are there for it to happen, but something breaks down and it doesn't happen. It doesn't come to fruition in a lot of municipalities. unfortunately, a lot of them are, rural communities. I mean, you've got your farmers, you've got the people that have, I don't want to, live in the city anymore, it's too congested, I want to come further out, but they have no roots because, as we get in the one training, the third place, there isn't a third place there because we can't get businesses. There's a disconnect, so maybe seeing if you can find speakers that talk about that relationship building between municipalities, and that trust goes a long way. I mean, once there is that, and there is that relationship, people feel better about their towns. They feel more confident to invest in their towns. And as you invest in your towns, then businesses start to come to towns. I mean,
Well, and I love the trajectory you're outlining, because sometimes what we talk about are the dire consequences of not doing it. And so there's just a disjointedness or a malaise or whatever, or lack of community spirit. That's one thing. Michael and I were asked to present on a project out in Otsego County where 4 towns were petitioning to consolidate into one town. And we asked, why would you do this? It didn't make a lot of sense to us. And the supervisor there, who was spearheading he was one of the guys who wanted to collapse, said he had been elected. No one ran on the ballot for supervisor. He got elected by write-in with 6 votes. And so basically he said, I've been hired to turn off the lights. And then in a town much closer to where we're sitting right now, we had a village mayor walk over to a town supervisor and say, nobody wants to run for village board next time, so we're gonna leave the keys with you guys. And so we're actively involved in conversations with the state. Said, what happened? Like, what happens if nobody runs? And the state's best answer right now is, well, somebody got to get elected. I mean, somebody's going to get written in, and who cares if it's Vladimir Putin? He's getting, he's going to be the village mayor. So, at the end of the day, it's the real consequences can be far more dire than just disengagement. So when we go into communities to do planning efforts, the 40% of it, 50% of it is getting out there in the communities to help them understand the consequences of being unplugged and the benefits of being plugged in. So yeah, I would say community engagement is a great topic for local leaders. How to do it, again, doesn't have to be crazy expensive. It doesn't have to be crazy complicated. Just empowering people to say, hey, you've got a voice to come in and shape. I mean, I think Perry finally got to the point where we're doing an economic resilience study for them. And we said, we're going to do a survey. They said, you don't need to do any more surveys. We got surveys. We got all the data you need. We've tapped our residents out. It's because they literally just, they hammer them all the time. What do you want? What do you need? What are you looking for? What can we do for you? That's just their way of doing business. So, anyway. All right, folks.